States of America, and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Selectman Raleigh, you had something you'd like to say for citizen statements?
Yeah, for those of you who weren't aware, we had a former Minute police officer pass away last month. Joe Bishop was a police officer in Hopedale and came here in Mendon, worked with me under Chief Dennis Grady in the 90s. And he was also an employee of Kelly and Ryan later on. But sadly, last month, he passed away with a brief illness, and I just wanted to recognize his service. He was an outstanding police officer and a great citizen. He grew up and lived in it for many years. So I just wanted to recognize his service. Didn't want it to go.
Thanks, Andrew. It was an absolute great guy.
Thank you. We have mailbox replacement policy. Is Henry Matthew?
Yeah, it's me.
Henry, would you mind coming up a little closer to our?
I'll stand in the middle if you like me.
Maybe it's coming around.
If you like me to explain why I like that, go up right there. Are you, Laura?
I am.
Well, thank you for calling me.
Oh, you're
I appreciate
welcome.
that.
No problem.
When we had that real heavy slushy rain several weeks back, I got a call from my neighbors who happened to be here, and they said, the truck that went by, the town truck just demolished your mailbox. Okay, and I went out and took pictures of it, it's all smashed apart. And I figured, well, what do I do about this now? Because I didn't break it. So I went and I spoke to Alan Tetro, who's a very nice gentleman, and he explained that we haven't been doing that for ages, okay, because of potential frivolous claims and so on. I understand that part. But after, and he also, I should say, to his benefit, he has a tire there with a rim in it, and they welded a pipe on it, and there's a mailbox on the top. He offered that as a loaner until I got something better, but I figured my neighbors would probably frown at me. So I went out and I bought one of those $30 posts from Home Depot and put it in there, and I'm up and through. But what bothers me is that I know the damage was done by a town employee, not purposefully at all, but carelessly, because everybody should have been going a lot slower with their plows in that particular storm, because that stuff is so heavy compared to regular snow. So I went to, I happened to be dropping off my census at the town clerks, and I asked them if they knew anything about the policy, and they said, the best thing to do is bring up the selectmen. I said, okay. So that's why I'm here. I've spoken to my son Franklin and a good friend in Milton, and they do have a policy. It's not much of an reimbursement, but it makes me feel like the town and I are heading in the right direction together. So what I would like to see, and I don't know how you folks can go about that, is some kind of, the post I had in was a beautiful, heavy-duty vinyl, one of those vinyls, but Alan mentioned they had a tendency to shatter. I said, well, it hasn't shattered for years already, but this time we did. But anyhow, I would just like to have you come up with some kind of policy, so I feel like that's the right thing to do. It's that simple. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I don't know what happens from here, but you guys know an odor, and I know in your wisdom you're going to come up with an answer I'd like to hear. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I know that this has come up in years past, and I do know that surrounding communities do have a policy where they do offer some form of payment for these incidences. So maybe it's a matter of looking at some of these surrounding towns and how they handle these situations, and then maybe looking at our policy and talking about changing it.
I want to make sure that, sir, you indicated that it was the town plow truck that we buy. And
Yes, my neighbor saw the whole thing.
Yeah.
And Alan admitted it was, and he said he'd have a chat with the guy and everything, because I guess there's a couple of things, maybe that was only broken mailbox this time. It was dead.
Like a lot of things that we've discovered, that there is a policy unwritten or otherwise that's happened in the past. And I just don't know. What we'll do is obviously reach out to Alan, who's the highway surveyor.
Yeah.
And find out what he's done in the past. I do remember at one point, there was one time when trash collection, wasn't canceled, and they had to plow, and they had no choice, and they destroyed a lot of trash cans. And there was some kind of replacement that was offered. So I'm thinking this isn't the first time we've come down this road, so we'll probably do is figure out what he did in the past.
Well,
Did he tell you to come? He told you to come talk to him?
No, he thought that when I left it, I was satisfied with his answer. Once I got out down the road, I said, no, this isn't right. He did mention something that way in the past, like 20 years, ago, stopped this because people were, they had 20-year-old mailboxes rotted out and fell down. They were trying to get something. So you'd have to have something in place to judge whether or not it should be compensated. But to him, it was a closed issue.
Well, I think it's a pretty safe bet. What you're saying is if it hadn't been for the plow truck knocking it over, it would still be there today.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have had to do all that work. I'm a very old person. That's a lot of work.
You've got more hair than I do, so I'm jealous.
So are we hearing we want to this first?
My suggestion would be to talk to the highway surveyor and see what. That's my suggestion.
What is it? As you said, surveyor?
Surveyor, highway surveyor, that's a term from, he's the highway superintendent of the.
Oh, I know how he feels right now. But if he had ever done it, suggested it. But now you're like, that's what he told me, that's what it is. So that's what he has in his mind. You don't get compensated.
I'm open to looking at that.
Right.
These, I know the state has a policy where they provide some sum of money for, it's probably a flat fee that they'll pay if there's damage done by their state vehicles, but.
I'm heading in the same direction, I just want to be consistent. Sure.
And I think there's so few and far between these storms if this happens that it does make sense in my mind that maybe we should be doing something for those people.
That's the first one I had in 36 years. So I don't think I'll repeat it pretty soon.
Right. Yes.
I'm going to spike the policies on the website.
It is. Yes. All right. We'll take a look at this moving forward. Thank you. Correspondence we have done. Discuss RFP for Morrison Drive and Milton Street.
Yeah, how would they meet? How would they? How would something? Great. Acting as planner here, I've been getting interest in both Milford site, and I say Milford Street site, meaning the leftover site from the larger parcel that we bought many years ago. We tried to do the overlay district. And as you recall at last town meeting, a lot of people said, gee, why don't we try to get rid of that last piece, which is past the brook and in front of the solar panels. It's zone business, it's fairly large, it's got almost 1,000 feet of frontage. So after talking to the town administrator, I wanted to put it on the street and see if there's any interest. There seemed to be a little interest from a couple of people who have made phone calls about it as a commercial enterprise. Also, we would get an appraisal so that you would know what is worth. And hopefully, if any bids came in, they'd be more than the appraised value and you could make a decision. And then it would ultimately go to town meeting if you chose to pursue it. That's the easy one. Morrison, I also had interest in, and as you know, we talked about subdividing out the back piece years ago, a year and a half ago, maybe when I first was hanging around here, there was interest from an abutter to purchase that back piece, which contains the shell of the police station, or the to-be police station. And there's been some interest in buying that from a non-abutter, who I met with and toured the building with last week, maybe the week before. That gets a little trickier because there's not enough frontage for a non-abutter to buy, unless you either leased it or you condomized it so that it's a condominium, if you will, and the property. You get the value back, you still have actually some control because the land would be jointly owned. So I'd like to see if there's a market for that and get an appraisal and see what the value is for either scenario. I haven't talked to any abutter in a year and a half about it, but I don't know. It seems to be sitting there. So with your permission, I'd like to at least put it together, see if there's interest. If there is, bring it to you. And if there's value to it that you think is worth it, bring it to town.
That's a good idea.
I agree. I think it'd be a good idea to know what the value of this, what the interest is.
Yeah.
Any action more than what's been going on is.
We have been working, right, with Keller Williams for over a year.
Right.
The goal has always been to identify what the actual value of that building and that parcel is as is, right? Because it was, very generously donated, but not completed. And so it's not as simple as just marketing something and selling it.
Well, it was all of the labor and materials, the shell was done, but wasn't that land a lone swap? That's how we acquired that piece.
That, I don't know, but
I believe, do you know?
What's that?
Morrison Drive, where the Shell police station was that always our land, it was a land swap, and we took it.
No, when we purchased Morrison Drive, we bought it from,
Right.
I don't know. Yeah, Jimmy Gray, right? He had that building, he owned the building, he owned the property, to the side of it. He kept that, and then that was the construction company, we turned it into the fire department. Well, I don't think we swapped anything.
I thought the one across where we're building with a shell, the police station was working on, I thought that piece of land, somebody gave us that, and we gave it. Well, no.
It came with that piece, and then there was donations to build.
another great reason we're having it surveyed.
That was the point. I think we need to.
But we can't sell a piece of property without knowing what the fair market value is anyway. And so we had talked about putting something together for an annual town meeting. And so we talked about the timeline, right? And we were thinking Biden would come back by March 15th, and I think the warrant closes on the 17th, correct, Laura?
Yeah.
23rd.
Oh,
23rd,
even
so,
better.
right, so we have time and we can put something on, and if it doesn't come back, we can pull it before
So
we go to town.
it's got steps along the way. The appraisal, is it value enough for you? Okay, let's put it out. Let's see if there's interest. If that's good enough for you, it goes to town meeting and see what happens. And we'll add, we are surveying it for a completely different reason. Well, originally, it was a completely different reason. As you know, the land use committee is trying to get access to the open space on Applewood that was donated or part of the development process. And I went out there with a couple members to try to find the best path from Morrison to that property. And it's not easy. There's a canal there, there's tons of wetlands. And until we know who owns what, I don't think we can define or make an access. And they're looking for a walking access, not a drivable access. So this will help all that.
Sounds good.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll stay right here.
Yeah, you're up.
We have water today.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of going in front of the Water and Sewer Board, I don't know, maybe a month ago, to talk about this and introduce yourself.
Just to be clear, it's the water.
Okay, the
There was a
water, sorry.
discussion about it, but we've never,
I don't believe we took that action
No.
before I was there, right? I mean, it's just the water.
Okay, the water. Well, we did talk about the water. And I wanted to introduce myself, but also talk about the possibility of pursuing a water and possible sewer study for the town. And as you know, we received an earmark of $150,000.
Right.
I've talked to two engineering firms who specialize in conducting these type and really specialize in municipal infrastructure, because that's what you want. I have no allegiance to either. I know either of them personally reached out. And I would like to take it a step further, and the Water Commission, at least when I talked to them, were in favor of this, and apply for what they call a one-stop grant and submit a letter of expression, is what they call it. And essentially what the state does now, and this isn't the way it used to be, but the state is you give them a letter of expression. So I want to do a water study, and we have 150. We guesstimate we need about 300,000. And that's a really good, adaptable, implementable water study instead of just one that's kind of iffy. And then they'll assign you with a point person and a grant program and try to get you matched up to that grant. And with the ARPA monies, there's money out there for these type of things. These are the kind of things they want for economic development.
Right.
Did you get
This-
the email that Brian Murray sent us?
Right. Yes, this week, but this board has talked about multiple times already, using that ARPA funds specifically for water and sewer and nothing else. And so we need this study in place in order to move forward, so
So we can use our ARPA funds supplement the 150.
we could, but might as well try to get a grant.
I know
Either
that,
way, I mean, we needed to know how much the project would cost and where we would even target.
I spoke to our state rep last week, actually, about the intersection of Cape Road and Hartford Ave East.
Yep. Yeah.
And he asked me to find out about that earmark, the 150, and then the two other $50,000 grants. You know, Kim and I talked about, I talked to our like the treasurer about the finance director. She was looking into it, but the point of all of this is that Brian already told me that if we were bringing is that original earmark that turned out to be 150. He had asked us for 300,000. That's what you told
You
us
and I had that.
was the number that we needed. If there's anything else, we wanted you to reach out to his office just to double check that.
Well, with the chair's permission, I'll work with Mike on that piece. I'd like to, the expression of interest has to be in, I think, a week. It's already written, if I took that leap of faith. And we'll see where they bring us. I never used this process. They used it last year. So it's a new process. I'll learn about it and we'll proceed and I'll make sure the Water Commission is involved every step of the way.
That's good.
So the 150 earmark was actually ARPA funds, from what I remember.
Is that-
Right.
Okay.
So that was a part of it.
Yeah. 150 was from the state.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up because I submitted through the Blackstone Chamber of Commerce a request for ARPA money for our water study. And I asked for 150,000, and at least 2 weeks ago, they had not heard yet. Because the chambers are also giving ARPA money, and then they distribute it to their members, which meant it in. So maybe we'll have too much money and we can use it to actually build something.
Right.
That would be.
There is a kind of stall right now. The legislature has kind of done their job, but it's the distribution part,
Right.
getting it all sorted out, and it's still kind of lagging here, so.
And a real question about
Yeah.
feasibility.
Oh,
And you want to go ahead?
Hi, yeah, my question was back on the Morrison Drive. When you put out the RFP, will you say that there would be an access to the open space? So, like,
And they'll have to provide it, yes.
okay,
And
Thank
once
you.
we decide where, we don't know yet, as you know.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
We don't know exactly where we want it yet. That's what the
Right.
survey is going to help us with, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I got two other things I wanted to talk about grants. The Economic Development Committee and I have talked several times about a facade improvement grant. And I've been working with the town of Upton and the town administrator and town planner, who I know, Paul, about doing a joint regional effort. And the whole idea would be that we would work with business owners or property owners, both, to work on giving them a forgivable grant. It's a loan up until a certain amount of time, then it's forgiven, to improve their property. And it was a priority when we were doing visioning on how to use ARPA money. And it was one of the higher priorities of the Economic Development Committee. So I would also, I would like to use some of our grant, it's called District Lending Technical Assistance Money for CMRPC, our regional planning agency, to kind of formulate the program and then go to One Stop to actually give us money. We're not looking at a lot, probably 50 grand, something like that. And the whole idea is we'd have a bit of, we'd have one person or a firm or someone hired to implement it for both towns. And they've designated their area, we've designated ours, which is right here, the downtown. And I think it's a great idea. And it's not just, it's for signage, facade, landscaping, anything to try to make the downtown a little more attractive and user-friendly is the idea. The last thing is in order to make us as Mendon more competitive now, again, this is all new, we need to get two things done. We need to try to become a housing choice recipient. And you're probably familiar with those, but I'm filling out the application now. It's quite lengthy. There's all kinds of data they want. I think we are eligible, and once we're designated, if we get designated, we will get bonus points in our grant application. The other thing is our housing production plan has expired, has a 5-year shelf life. If we can get that rejuvenated and authorized by the state, we will also get bonus points. And this is the whole deal. You keep trying to get these other things done, so you're demonstrating to the state that you're being proactive and trying to enhance affordable housing, which ironically or coincidentally helps economic development. So, and one last thing, and you got me on a roll here, is it's become very apparent to me, at least in Mendon and probably in a lot of towns that don't have water, that not only is infrastructure for water an economic development tool, it helps the environment. Instead of having 5,000 straws in the ground, you have one that's monitored and professionally done. And also, it's a tool for good, affordable housing. Because without water and sewer, you can't get the density that you need to get affordable housing, and you're susceptible to 40Bs that you don't want instead of the 2D. So there's a whole lot of reasons.
Yeah.
That's my spiel.
Thank you, that was great. Any questions?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you, Jack.
Lots of progress.
Thank you, Jack.
Not letting you know how
Perfect timing too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Our public hearing, yes.
So, well, we
In a
actually,
couple minutes.
no, I was just gonna say, the animal control officer is actually at a call right now. So he's gonna log in when he's done, so we can do the public hearing and then we can do that after.
We've just been bringing you back. We just want you
I know.
to keep coming back every
We will.
time.
You're a frequent client.
Yeah.
We'll get bonus points, right?
Put it in with the
Where can you
grade.
redeem them?
I don't know. Hope they'll.
So,
Do I have to make a motion to open the public hearing?
second.
The Milton Select Board will hold a public hearing in the Upper Town Hall Meeting Room, 20 Main Street, Mendon, Mass. on the 28th day of September. This is a continuance 2021 at 7 p.m. to consider an application for the alteration of premise for an existing annual general on-purpose all alcohol beverage license and to amend the existing adult entertainment license for Showtime Entertainment LLC, George Fenari, 49 Milford Street, Mendon, Mass. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 12. This hearing was continued to 12:1 and then to 2:2. Public comment will be heard.
Did you already?
It's a hearing.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Want to drive up a chair?
Yeah. We were here about 2 months ago, I think.
Yes.
And I explained then that we were here to amend the adult entertainment license. We've been before the planning board, site plan review, we've been before the zoning board of appeals. We're a special permit, they were granted, we've been for conservation, and now we're before you. And we had an engineer at that time who presented all the plans. And as I recall, there weren't any real questions, or he answered the questions to your satisfaction. But the issue was raised about traffic because the traffic study that we had was a 10-year-old traffic study. So we had a new traffic study done. I honestly thought it would be an updated traffic study. It'd be about 2 pages long. But in fact, it's, probably 150 pages. And he did traffic counts there, and he did traffic counts at the intersections. And he reached the conclusion that it was going to have no effect on the traffic in the area based on counts. And that's in large part because your counts, as he shows, are very high in that area around 4:15 to 5:15, which is sort of peak traffic, and they're high in the middle of the day, but after 6 o'clock, they just drop off. And this is a 165 seat place and just have no impact on traffic. So he asked us to do it and we agreed to do it. And,
Appreciate that.
and I think it's all in order now. You're placed in a position where there's a state statute which says that the license, the entertainment license shall be granted unless you find that you cannot operate in a way that doesn't affect traffic or doesn't affect safety. So they don't leave you very much discretion, to say the least.
Is that study something that we can get a copy and put on
Yeah.
our website?
We do have a copy of that.
Totally.
It's in that
Packet.
folder looking, yeah. Sorry, yeah, this would be.
I'll have you put it on.
Yeah.
Sorry, then.
No, that's not surprising, what he's saying
Right.
about the traffic. It's not, so.
And we appreciate you following through with that. It's in the area to see that.
No, I understand. You have to dot your i's and cross your t's. It has to be in order,
Right.
and we're happy to do that.
Thank you. Are there any questions from this? No questions on the board? Questions online?
None.
one.
Okay, one question.
My name is Jim Duncan, here in town on Bicknell Drive. So I, through the great help of Laura and Kim, done a little research. Is the size of the building set by way of the planning board already saying that it will be significantly bigger? Is that been determined?
Yes, the planning board has already had those hearings and those adjustments have been made. This is an alteration to the liquor license and the adult entertainment license that needs to be changed to coincide with what the planning board is.
So the building, I'm late to the game here, so
That's okay.
the building is established, Conservation Commission's A-OK, ZBA's A-OK, correct? All those, as applicants council has said, they've all been kind of squared away, correct?
As far as I know, yes.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah, I think we had 3 hearings before the planning board. They had an independent person review all the plans, and we went back and forth with all those plans and then all the changes that the independent person wanted, the independent engineer wanted.
But really for us, at our first hearing we had back in September, you know, it comes down to safety, and there was some questions from the board and from the public about traffic study that had been referenced, but it was an older study and things changed over 10 years. So we really asked that the applicant provide an updated traffic study, which they've done now, so where we're at.
The only other piece that I watched the videos, you know, from the previous meetings, and I think was there a parking concern about parking behind the building towards the Crestview neighborhood?
We eliminated that concern because we're gonna have valet parking.
Okay. Yeah, but the valet, you can't, by law or legislation. So it's like giving me the sleeves off of the vest, right? So that you can do that for 3 months and you can take it away. So I think the parking is really the big issue. It was the issue many years ago during the meetings that we had over at the school, because if you make the building bigger, your parking lot's small, right? And, you know, these establishments that the applicant's council represents of these light businesses, when you look at their websites, they market to large groups, which means large capacity vehicles. So I don't know if the valets are gonna, can they drive school buses? Can they drive, you know, the big stuff? But to me, it's always been about, you know, parking issue. And then you recall, and I don't know who was on the board years ago, maybe just one. There was this concern of parking on Route 16, which I doubt will happen, frankly. I really do doubt it. But to me, you know, and I live in an abutting neighborhood to Crestview. I'm not an abutter. But I ride my bike and walk over that way. And it's really close to some of the people's homes. And if there's some ability to congregate behind the building, I think it's proposed on the same kind of like position on the lot, or would it change?
It's in the same position and we'll just get larger.
That's what I thought.
And there's more than enough parking for the number of seats. It's like 20 seats more than you need under your zone. And we really tried hard to think about how noise would not be an issue. And that's why we came up with valet parking, which we thought was great for the neighborhood. Because that would mean that nobody was congregating behind the building. Only people would be in front. We saw that as an issue, and we saw that as like, we said, you know, that might present a problem.
So to just answer the question, you're right. I don't think we can force them to have valet parking. I just don't think it's a rule in our bylaws or what have you. However, if the valet parking is not being adhered to as they said that they would do when they come for their annual renewal of their permits, we'll have the discussion. And if they don't, you know, if they don't do it, then that's, I guess, how we would regulate it. Again, I don't know how legal that is. I would have to run it by Cindy. But at this point, you know, we're taking somebody on their word, I guess, at this point. Again, we didn't ask them to do the valet parking. They're offering it.
And I think, you know, that's a conversation we would have if that were to happen, but I think it's also in the applicant's best interest to adhere to what you're saying tonight and continuing to do valet parking.
Absolutely.
It makes sense.
It's not in our interest to have anybody come and complain about noise.
And we have to be very careful, right? So we can't say to this one business, because we may not love what the business is, to say that, hey, you have to do valet parking because you might have noise back there. We can't, we have nothing to go by. There may be noise if people are back there, right? There's no way to tell right now. But there's no reason that we can't, like, for instance, if people were noisy in the New England Steakhouse parking lot and the person that lives next door was concerned about it, we can't tell them they have to have valet parking. So it's great that they're offering it. We hope that they continue to do it, but at the same time, we can't just regulate it because we don't, because it might be too noisy.
No, if you can't regulate it, it's not attached to the permit.
Sure.
So it's kind of like it's an on, right? So at an occupancy of 165 and a staff of 24, you have almost 180 cars on the lot.
So that's assuming every single person brought
It's
their
a
own
bad
car.
assumption, I get that.
Okay.
It's a bad assumption. But I would just ask, because I've done it, if you go over to our lovely 3-car dealership and count how much room and space 180 cars takes up. It's a lot. So that's all. I just had some, I'm late to the game, I know.
Yeah, sure. And that all takes place too, as far as the engineering review is enough spots. Maybe, have you seen a copy of the plans?
I have not.
I'm sure we have a copy somewhere. I have one in front of me. I'll email you a copy to have
I'm
at
gonna
least.
print out this packet for him right now, actually.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay,
I appreciate it.
thank you.
Any other,
I don't see anything online.
Okay.
accept the motion to close the hearing?
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to approve the alteration of premise application for the existing annual general on-premise all alcohol beverage license for Showtime Entertainment LLC, George Bernard, 29 Milton Street, in Mass. Changing the planned establishment from a 2,000 square foot establishment with a seating capacity for 74 people to a 4,806 square foot establishment with seating capacity for 165. And to serve alcohol from 12 p.m. to 1 a.m. and to amend the existing adult entertainment license for Showtime Entertainment LLC to operate a building larger than 2,000 square feet and taller than 14 feet high, operate before 4:30 p.m. and serve alcohol.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Budget presentation. Oh, okay.
Oh,
Is he on yet?
I think maybe. No. Oh, I don't know. No. Sorry, just because there's a couple of no names on here. Kevin Sullivan, are you currently on the remote? If you're speaking, you are muted, but I'll assume not yet.
Yeah, let's take the time to open the finance committee meeting, 122 at 6:40.
So, Mike, what do you got? You got Mike Menalia, Jack Hodgins, and there's four, so we'll miss, and who else? Oh, Nick. Oh, and Nick. All right, I see him.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. So, for you guys that are just on remote, if you have questions when the budget's up, just raise your hand. I'll keep an eye out for it, and we'll make sure we get to it just so that we don't miss you, okay? Mike, oh, he might be on. We are still expecting.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
Right. We're on the
sorry,
same
I'm
page.
sorry. I didn't mean to
So
interrupt you.
if you don't mind sticking around, yeah, you know.
Kevin Sullivan, yes or no?
Not yet.
Okay.
I didn't. They're gonna hang up. I am going to.
You want me to do a little intro?
Yes.
Tell us where we're at?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to the first of many. So you should all be able to access or have a copy of the latest and greatest of the budget document I'll keep saying it, over and over. It changes hour by hour, minute by minute. So it's possible you have an outdated copy in front of you, but for the most part, the larger numbers will stay pretty consistent. All of the department's budgets are in at this point. The real mysteries, of course, will remain around items that will come in later on our benefits, which are estimates. The school number, which we got a draft of this week, which will also change probably before this thing is done. You can tell we're in a unique position for the first time in many years because of the school's budget, that we actually have a slight surplus coming into tonight's meeting, even with all of the requests funded. This is a little bit different than in previous years. I've done no vetting of the department's requests at all. So everything that they have requested is in the budget in its entirety. The list, as in previous years, if you will look at the bottom of the page, you will see that right now, overall, everything included, the town operation increase is $435,000. Of that $435,000, $306,000 of that are budget drivers, which are things that we don't have much control over. That number might switch a little bit, and then the department's requests are about 265, 275, depending on how it shakes out. So tonight, we had postponed public safety last meeting, so we will have them. I have allotted 15 minutes each because we have 6 tonight, I believe. They are going to move quickly through their budgets. Their documents are either online in that folder somewhere in cyberspace, or they're here. And so I believe Alan is first. He looks very excited to be here.
Good evening. Oh my God. I'm not going off of Kim's budget, I'm off of my own. Getting a bit better.
If it's in KBS, it's the same.
And it's the same thing. As you can see, if you took a look at my budget, it's pretty level funded, except for a couple of things. One of the things that I'm looking for is to increase my building maintenance budget by $20,000, and that is one of the buildings up at Inman Hill has another roof on it, and it is dire need of repair. It's a awesome storage building for our winter equipment during the summer and our summer equipment during the winter. I have been reaching out to a number of different contractors. I have not put an advertisement in have not advertised it. I have been going through a couple of supply houses, and they kept saying, we can get your price. So I am taking a stab at the dock here, saying it's going to be around $20,000 with my experience.
Any chance it's going to be 25?
20,000.
Is there a chance it's going to be 25? Because then it belongs in capital.
I'm thinking,
It really doesn't belong in operating.
I gotta be honest with you, I really don't know.
There's something else the building needs?
Well, put it this way, will you know before March 17th or April 15th, right?
I'm gonna try.
Okay, because.
I will put an advertisement. I will advertise it.
Right,
I've been dealing with a couple of different lumber companies in town, around here that say they have contractors that can do it, and, I haven't heard, I keep waiting. So I will put an ad in the paper as soon.
ideally, that's perfect for capital.
Regardless, it really should be done. I've patched it a couple of times. We really do not want to lose that.
Well, can I ask him, is that the building that, when we went to look at the truck last year or 2 years ago, you brought me up there, up off of Inman Hill, right?
It's the second one in, it's got a metal roof. I took care of the roof on the other building probably 8 years ago. That's got a new roof on it now.
Is there anything else that second building needs if because I know you use it for storage,
But you're up there all year long getting things in and out of it. Is there
Or
anything else?
any of
Right now, if we throw a roof on that, that'll go for a while.
Okay.
Either way, should get done. But ideally, it would be out of capital.
Right, I think it could probably be combined with another project you might have. It just needs to be one vote, basically, one project.
Okay.
So it's one project, 25 or more.
I'll work on it.
Okay.
And then the other thing that is gonna, gotta be increased is the stormwater management, portion of my budget, and because I can't explain it as good as I gave you both, I gave a copy of the proposed, what needs to be done this year. So, I'm looking into increase that to 44,800, and I believe I was budgeting 20.
Yeah, 24. Before, yeah.
That's mandated by the state anyways, right?
Yeah, you gotta do it.
Right. They tell you.
Yeah, so I included that increase in budget drivers, obviously, and I include the building maintenance, I think, in request, but I know that's for the first, so.
Okay. So that 24.8 for the stormwater plan is for services to assist with home
Correct.
development?
Yeah.
Okay. We level funded.
Everything else is well funded.
So, yeah, I was gonna talk about snow and ice for just a second. So you know that our long-range financial plans policy is that we have to budget the average of the previous 5 years total. That happens to be only $174,000 this next year, but the state actually mandates that you can't budget less than you budgeted the previous fiscal year. So our budget for this year is the same as last year's, but make a mental note because it's only dropped low because we had one low year in that 5. It's going to jump at least $50,000 to $60,000 based upon averages. They're all over 200,000 for the last couple of years. So that number's going to go up substantially next year. But we can, so our snow, since we have new members of the FinCom, snow and ice is one of the only areas of the budget in which we can actually deficit spend. So any other line, really, you can't. So we can go negative. We could go negative, I don't want to say it out loud. We can go negative $200,000. And we can either, in the way, we're allowed to do that, in the way that we handle that is, we can either leave it and it gets added in the recap in the fall when we certify budget in the text, or the last couple of years, we've been able to cover it with transfers from low expenditures within the budget ourselves, or free cash. That's how we pay. Okay. It's set that way that you can't budget it lower so that you can't sort of scam the state out of money, right? We can't intentionally budget it low, planning to borrow and spend that money somewhere else. That's the way it works.
Speaking of that, do you have snow and ice budget?
Right now, we will be deficit spending. It's been a big year for material.
Yeah.
I mean, we had that one big storm, but we've been out numerous times. And unfortunately, salt is at its premium right now. It has been, it went up, I believe, $8 a ton from last year, if not more. But yeah, I mean, we try to, we use a pre-mixed salt, which we tend to use less of, and we tend to go out less often with it. When I first started a while ago, we used to use straight salt, and we would use a lot more of it, and then the overtime was a lot higher because we were constantly coming in with this. Seems to make a brine and stand a little bit longer, and it seems to work a lot better.
You guys did a fantastic job.
Love it fun.
I just want to, one other thing, this is something I have to change already. But just as a note under salaries in here, because it looks like it's zero. So this past year, the board settled a contract with the highway department union. The COLA increase for that union is 2%. It shows as zero because we've had turnover in the department and we've brought in people at a lower step than at the step they were at before. So it looks like less because they're new hires.
And it was a time lapse.
Yeah.
What fund is it? Which line?
It should, see how it's 206, so look at salaries. So when you actually see the budget document later, all these yellow lines will be rolled up. So the salary, this 307, 817, right? See how it's $200 different? It should be a couple $1,000 there because of the number of employees in that department, but it's only a couple hundred because we had turnover and they came in at lower step. So. And then Alan's, I have to adjust. It's short. Sorry, buddy.
No, it's,
Well, I see it was adjusted at the STM, but it wasn't adjusted for the request, so I have to fix that.
Mike, do you understand that piece?
Yeah. As a point of process, right, the expectation was anything that had a change was supposed to have a document sent out previous to the meeting for us to review and go over. I don't remember seeing such a document for this.
You probably won't see many documents, so.
I noticed.
In full transparency, these department heads and these budgets have been running in a certain way for a very long time, very successfully, with very little change, because we haven't had any money. No pun intended. We've had, basically, they have been asked the last 4 years in a row to just provide level funded budgets with no requests at all. So you will see, when they come to these meetings, they will answer for any of these increases in these lines, and some of them will have elaborate documentation because it has a lot to do with staffing and hours, but for something like stormwater management, he'll bring a quote in, that's basically what you see. A couple of departments will fill out the forms, but.
I guess my expectation in budget presentation is for department heads to present the budget, right? The way we've always done it has never been an acceptable answer in any of my corporate areas. I don't completely agree with the way we've always done it has been fine. So I'm not saying that there's anybody's doing anything bad or that, anything's trying to be hidden. I just prefer transparency and information ahead of time, especially for, we have multiple new people on this board that's supposed to be watching over stuff like this, right? So it's helpful for me as a new person. And I mean, it's an expectation.
I think the thing to understand is that every year when there were changes, we would have the department come in and discuss it with us.
Changes,
And
right.
talk about the changes. What you're asking is, rather than having it verbally, you want to have an explanation, not just in a number. And then have them come in and say, this is higher. You want them to give you a document that says in writing why it's higher.
In the budget process document that I received from Kim when I was first appointed, that was actually, that one of the line items is that any positive change requires a written detail of why it was changed. So I did not receive such document as part of the process that I was given a single one-page document. I appreciate being provided it now. My expectation would be to receive information for meetings like this at least a week ahead. But
Apparently this document is available a week before.
What?
So I have to agree with Mike, that's totally.
yeah, I mean, if it was available a week before, then it just needed to be emailed.
I will say that we've been talking for a while with Lonnie, who runs the IT company, about creating access online so that all of these type of documents can be put in there. And we've been talking about it for 6 months. And a couple of days ago, I had an email with a select board document. And then I think yesterday there was a finance document. So what you're asking for is a little bit of a lag. But it's-
Right. Document that he mailed a week ago is this one document he has now.
Yeah, and I guess.
We never received it.
So you didn't, right, you haven't yet, but you will
Right,
because they're
because
gonna be.
so it's going
Right.
into the
I
folder.
agree.
So here's the thing though, is we're at this point with the budget where the select board is deciding what is going to be passed on to you as what's new. So we may say after this, at this meeting, well, this 20,000 should go capital expenditure. This 24.8, we're not even gonna do it. let's just say that's the case. So you may not have all that info right now because we may change these numbers completely and not even fund these line items for you to even discuss whether or not it should be spent.
So my expectation is we are here in a joint meeting so that we can collaboratively work through these details together, right? In the most efficient way possible. Therefore, us having the information at the same time to work through the process at the same time is the most efficient way moving forward. So if we'd like to do it completely serially, then we can have our own meeting, we can have different people present at different periods of time. I don't think that's the most efficient use of our
It's
time.
not, and it's never, and we haven't done, working in this direction for a while, because we had joint meetings in the past. And again, just to reiterate it, what Norm, what you're asking for, and Mike, what you asked for, is to have the documentation available. What Lonnie has set up, and we've been working on setting it, is actually having, an online format, so that as those documents become available, we go in there, and for complete transparency, the select board and the finance committee can both see it as soon as it's available. And that's the plan.
Right, it'll be there, this isn't a new request, it's not new information, if we have documents, they'll be in there, just as we discussed.
Yeah, I guess our concern as a finance committee, this has been a while, right? This has been said, it's gonna be done.
All right, look, we've gone through, we've worn this out, let's not do it again tonight. I understand what you're saying, I'll make sure it's right, I told you I would. And I'll even take blame that it's not there, I've been getting the whole thing set up, but let's not do it again tonight. If the highway's done, let's move on to the next one. We'll be here on- I understand your frustration, I do.
Are there any specific questions for Al?
I do. So I noticed on your diesel fuel line, B4, we budgeted the exact same one last year. And it seems like fuel has gone up dramatically in the last year, so I was wondering if you had accounted for that. Well, what is your run rate, I guess, to this point, maybe this year?
We typically use around 10,000 gallons. Did I put in an increase for the fuel costs? I did not.
So I'm just thinking a year ago, fuel costs have gone up dramatically.
Our fuel cost has not really.
Is that by contract?
We don't pay taxes on our fuel.
Okay, so your fuel costs.
Way lower.
And now, and you also buy it in a consortium, don't you?
I buy in a consortium.
With a bunch of others to help keep that price down. I'm sure it will be effective, but not to the effect that I think we feel at the pumps.
So it's the same amount as last year.
Correct.
Tell me it's not gonna go up at all.
I'm not,
I'm just trying.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Went up on the screen.
don't see anybody got any questions at home?
Any comments on Kevin?
All right, Alan, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna check for the,
Yeah, is Kevin here yet?
Kevin?
Kevin Sullivan. Yeah. Kevin Sullivan, are you online yet? He's watching TV. Kevin Sullivan, are you online yet?
Yeah. All right. Next, we have town clerk.
I'm here.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi there.
All right, you want to guide us through?
Sure. I don't know if the FinCom got my supporting documentation. I thought I might have sent it, but
We did, thank you for sending it early, I appreciate it.
okay. So, as far as the elections budget goes, that's all driven by Two things. We're increasing to 2 precincts and we have 3 elections this year. And basically, I have to adjust the numbers based on that. There's no extra asks in the elections budget. Town clerk budget, there's a few increases in fees for my dues, increase in fee for dog tags, $200 to bind some of the books that are in the vault. And the dog license database maintenance, actually that number was in the elections budget and I moved it over to town clerk because that's where it belongs. And that's about it. The one thing I had about the spreadsheet, Kim, is my bottom line number was 73304 for town clerk, and I think it says 71874. I can't figure out where the discrepancy is because when I add it with a calculator, my number comes up right. So it's something we can talk about offline if you want.
Okay.
But that's pretty much it. I'm not really asking for anything new.
I think the formula is no good.
My calculator works.
Got it.
Thank you, we'll fix it. Ellen, I have a quick question. You had mentioned in elections and registration, and it could just be confusion or not confusion, I guess. Did we, based on 22, the numbers are higher. Is this stuff that we transferred at a special town meeting or something? Is that why the number's higher and now it's going to be the same? But we're looking at a difference of, 25,000, 13,000, 10,000. Do you see what I have on the screen?
It's really tiny.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you talking about the elections?
Under elections and registration, the differences it's a $25,000.
Right, that's.
Right. Because last year we only had 1 election last year.
Right, it's not, it's.
Okay, I didn't, I'm just asking because it was a high.
Yeah. So that, it's all driven by how many elections we have. When we have a presidential, it's even more elections. But, and the fact that we have 2 precincts costs a little bit more in salary items and contracted services. Those are the drivers for the election budget.
Right, and so for her increases, I've included them in drivers since it's not optional.
Questions?
Questions at home? Mike? Yeah, hold on, you got to turn your microphone on, buddy. Yep.
Good evening.
Hi, Mike.
Ellen, how many books do you have to restore? I know we tried.
$200 will get me 2 books.
How many books in total going forward that you, because what I'm getting at is the Community Preservation Act, that would fall under their spending. They could.
Actually, I tried to go that route, Mike, and I was shut down. So last year, was it last year or the year before? It was last fiscal. I had 27 books bound using some money that I had left over for education because there were no conferences. But I did approach the community preservation and they said because that was not, they were not historic enough that I couldn't use those funds.
Okay, I'll look into that. I mean,
Okay.
that's something we can work on towards.
That would be great if that we could use those funds, but I don't want to have to do 27 books at a time anymore. So that's why I figured I'd put 2 books at a time each year and I'll be able to keep up with it.
How many books altogether do you have to rebind?
Right now, not many, because I did a huge binding last year.
Okay.
So it'll change every year. You know, there's some town reports that I bind. I bind. I haven't bound the FinCom stuff. I do have a lot of FinCom ones. And street lists, things like that.
Okay, I'll look into that and I'll get back to you on it.
Perfect. Yep.
There's the handbook.
It was Dan, but then it went down. Dan, do you have a question?
I'm all set.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, we have,
I got the animal control.
here.
Yay. We take a quick break for a second. Kevin Sullivan, I think you're there. You're muted if you're trying to speak.
The closest we've been. He's on.
Making progress.
Kevin Sullivan. We're getting closer. Maybe Chief Kersey can.
I can see if I can get him on the cell phone.
Well, he's here. He just,
Just needs to.
Yeah, he's on the phone, he's just muted right now. So
Don't unmute himself.
maybe he didn't know the conflict that he done so quick.
Is there a way to mute the rooster?
well, if he dials in, yes.
Well, should we go to the library?
Yeah, let's go to the library. We're getting there.
Hello, Andrew. And how are you?
Good. Okay, so I actually sent out documents to FinCom get. Okay, so the Taft Library budget proposal for 2020. This pretty quickly. Basically made notes of it.
I'm here now.
Who's that?
Pause it.
He's on twice, I think, right?
Is that Kevin?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that.
Sure.
My I didn't realize my computer. I don't have a speaker on my computer.
Oh, got it. Oh, got it.
So we've been, past couple meetings, we've had some folks come in to talk about problem rooster on Daniels Road.
Neck Hill.
2-1 Neck Hill Road.
Neck Hill, okay. So are you familiar with this situation?
I am very little. So obviously I was informed that there was an issue with neighbors and a rooster issue. Obviously Mendon doesn't have any bylaw pertaining to roosters, but many of my other towns do.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about what those bylaws in other towns do? Are they prohibiting roosters? Are they?
So a lot of most of the other towns prohibit roosters. The reason is a lot of it actually turns into a disturbing the peace issue. And the reason it's like that is because a typical rooster can crow up to 142 decibels. And while if you're in Massachusetts, typically between, X amount of hours and X amount of hours, you're not supposed to exceed 50 decibels, and then usually throughout the night, and then 70 decibels during the day. So if you have a rooster now crowing at 142 decibels, anywhere from, 3 a.m. to 7 a.m., you're exceeding, more than double exceeding what the state, essentially what's usually enforced throughout the state for essentially disturbing the peace. What I have seen some towns do, and what I've seen in other towns for bylaws, what they'll do is they'll set a limitation to, you can have a rooster essentially if you can meet a 250-foot setback. And what they're doing is they're saying that for a 250-foot setback, the decibels to be able to meet your neighbor will be within the, requirements for, what's legal and what's not.
So those towns have some allowances if you can meet certain setbacks.
Yes. Quite a few towns, especially in this area where most of our neighbors are fairly close. Most of the towns are banning them, and it's because, again, it's you know what I mean? Like we've kind of definitely settled these towns significantly more than they once were. I mean, you no longer have, fields A through D and, your neighbor a half mile down the road. It's most neighbors are now 150 feet away and, you have, a half an acre. So although you want to do your homesteading with your chickens, which I'm in full support of, in order to have a rooster, though, if your rooster is crowing at 3 o'clock in the morning, in my opinion, you chose to have the chickens, your neighbor didn't. So, I think a lot of it turns into we don't have a lot of the neighborly respect anymore. But a bigger issue here is, it does turn into a disturbing the peace. It's the same with, we have a similar issue with dog barking. There's no necessarily state law for dogs barking certain hours, except, again, it's a disturbing the peace. You don't have the right to, disturb your neighbor's peaceful enjoyment of their own property. To me, it should be the exact same thing with roosters. Again, a rooster can crow at almost a higher decibel than a jet engine. 3 o'clock in the morning, if that was my neighbor, I know I wouldn't be very happy. So yes, I do believe we need to have some sort of requirement, and I'm not looking to hinder anyone's, right to farm or right to own chickens, but, essentially we don't really have any quote unquote chicken farmers in this area. No one's using these chickens to produce other chicks and, and especially not in the residential zones that we are having them in.
So Kevin, can I ask a quick question? You say for most towns, do you have a list of these towns?
Oh, hold on. Sorry, I did not hear that. I apologize. I'm going to step outside my...
Maybe it's those dogs barking.
Yeah, sorry. I had to go to the shelter in Blackstone. I couldn't get it on my phone earlier. But yeah, so it's, if you can repeat that one more time.
Yeah, just looking for a list of the towns that currently have it.
Currently, I was actually just I tried searching out towns that had the 250-foot setback. I was actually just trying to search that out again. I had read about one that said that they had a 250-foot setback. I wasn't able to find out which town it was, but I can tell you that Blackstone and Millville both have no rooster requirements. And I know Uxbridge amended their bylaws. I believe they also amended to no roosters as well.
Okay, thank you.
Just to be clear, they have chickens, they're just not allowed to have roosters.
Yeah, you can have chickens, just no roosters. Again, at the end of the day, you're the benefit that we're having to roosters. I mean, your typical roosters would be used to essentially help keep your hens safe. And a lot of times it would be when you'd have, your free range hens, your rooster would be watching over them. Most of our chicken owners in this area no longer have free range. I mean, in the past, people had free range because you had 200 acres and, your chicken coop was located in the southern quarter pasture and there was horses and goats on one side and pigs on the other. So like your chickens stayed within a generalized area close to their hen house. So you'd have your rooster to protect from, hawks and such. I mean, today, most of our chicken farmers have a 6x6 coop in their backyard that contain chickens. And, the need for roosters has definitely reduced itself quite a bit in this area. We don't have people hatching eggs the way they used to. Majority of people, don't waste the time with going and buying the incubator and hatching the eggs and, raising them when you can go to Tractor Supply and buy them for $1.99.
So what I would say that we don't necessarily have a rooster problem, we have a noise problem, right? So.
It's definitely a noise issue.
Okay, so if the noise issue, if it's a noise issue, then we need, I don't know that we need to put in a rooster bylaw, but we need to put in a bylaw that you maybe put your roosters in at night, like, and if you want them to crow, put them in your basement, and then you can listen to them, right? So there's the people don't to them.
Essentially, it's one of those things where, you know, at the end of the day, if it's kind of one of those things where if we really want to do, we have in other towns where we've, you know, essentially moved forward with disturbing the peace charges, and it ends up turning into a criminal matter more than, you know, it actually should be. So yes, it definitely turns into an issue, and like I said, a lot of it is turning into people don't have the same neighborly respect we once had.
You know what, the part of the issue too, though, is a few years ago, Milton actually voted to make it a right to farm community. And I believe,
and I'm not looking to take away anyone's right to farm.
What's that?
I'm not looking to take away anyone's right to farm. I think the right to farm should be there. But it's right to farm to what extent, though? And that's the big question, because, I mean, if you live on a third of an acre, you can't have a pig farm. You know what I mean? You know, state law, you know, not that the town has bylaws, but, like, it's a right to farm town. But if you're on a third of an acre, you're not going to start pig farming. You know what I mean? I'm not looking to hinder anyone's rights. I'm just saying at the end of the day, you know, it's one of those things where if people aren't going to have respect for one another to where, you know, they can live comfortably next to their neighbor and not disturb the neighborhood, I think that, you know, some sort of a regulation or something has to be put in place to where we're also not adding further hindrance to our police department that's already stretched thin enough.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm not arguing with the idea that this could be a strict peace issue. It's just that with the right to farm community bylaw, there could be additional work that would need to get done to, you know, come up with a compromise where you could still have a rooster, but you've got to keep them indoors or in a, you know, some kind of a setback situation. That's all I'm getting at.
So can I make a comment? I remember when we switched over to being an agrarian community, because I was at those meetings, I thought that was great, that again, if I could have a hippo, as long as it didn't bother my house. And this is the same situation, is that as long as the neighbors are not made reasonably uncomfortable, they can have it. If you live with these roosters, you'd be aware of how noisy they can be. And I don't think you can take them in and stop them from throwing, they'll probably break the window down.
Well, my understanding is if you have them indoors in the dark, that actually is, that's a mechanism. When there are issues that they begin, cues that they pick up on in the environment that people start growing.
Let's just, so say, town council, is there, first, if you want to, yep, good, gotcha, all right. Is there anything that you're aware of that in statute that we can use to address this specific issue where the rooster is disturbing peace? We're not having this issue broadly across the community. What, is there something we can do? Is there something that either the police department can do, the Board of Health can do?
Well, depending on the situation, and I must confess, I am unaware of whether you have any bylaw in place that would even remotely come close to touching this, but assuming there's nothing at the moment, you know, if a rooster, just like a dog or any animal or any person or any other activity, is creating a nuisance, they can be fined, they can be ordered to stop the nuisance. You know, go to the police, have the police stop them. I mean, that's the interim measure. And I think the long-term solution is take a good look at how much of a problem and how big a problem it is, and what you as a town of Mendon think makes the most sense. You know, it may be you have to have X amount of land. It might be an increased scale of penalties, you know, depending on the number of complaints in the course of a year. But right now, there are regular civil remedies and probably criminal ones too for interfering with someone's enjoyment, not to mention private suits or actions against each other. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I think right now it's a matter of how big a problem is it and what does the town want to ultimately do? And I don't know that you have that information yet.
And just gonna reiterate it again, this is gonna be a very touchy subject in Denver, right? Hugely touchy. This is gonna be like beach law. People are gonna come out in droves for this, right? What we have is, we should tread very lightly on how we do this. When we have a noise problem, not a rooster problem, we need to get people to just be more neighborly. It sounds like your neighbors don't want, I have roosters. I was lucky enough, I got quiet ones. I had a loud one. And it wasn't, I guess, as loud as nobody complained, but also we have a little bit of land, so, but it's, I'm just saying, it's gonna be very touchy. If we come out of the gates swinging on this, we're gonna get kicked right back in the corral. So, I really would say that if we were going to even reach this, that we try to get it so that people will put noisy roosters inside. Right, to get them quiet for what you're trying to hear. That's all I'm saying.
And this is, if I can just quickly read this is the right to farm bylaw. This is what it says. It says it's the policy of this community to conserve, protect, and encourage the maintenance and improvement of agricultural land, production, food, and other agricultural products, and also for its natural and ecological value. This disclosure notification is to inform buyers or occupants the property they are about to acquire or occupy lies within a town where farming activities occur. Such farming activities may include, but are not limited to, activities that cause noise, dust, and odors. Buyers or occupants are also informed that the location of property within the town may be impacted by agricultural operations. That alone could hinder the police department from telling somebody that you have to keep the rooster quiet. But I think Lonnie's exactly correct. If you can just put the roosters inside our enclosure during the hours you don't want them to crow, then they shouldn't be crowing.
I also feel like you shouldn't have to tell your neighbor.
Correct.
If you have that noise of a rooster, for all lack of a better term, don't be a jerk. Take care of it. You know, if you got your people that leave their dogs out barking all night, I hear them when I step outside my back door some night late at night. Who's doing this? Like that is a mind blower to me too. But I understand they have an issue and we're the neighbor police. So I guess maybe we need to ask for them. I don't know. Because this seems to be a nightmare across, not just what you guys are dealing with. There's plenty of neighborly nonsense going on.
Kevin, is there an issue that you could go speak to these people that do have the roosters and talk to them about it and see what, see for yourself?
I'd be happy to go speak with them. I have no problem with that at all.
You have to go to the same neighbor with dogs about it. I've called, Hank has called.
Maybe Kevin should go visit you folks and.
So here's my what I would recommend. Kevin, if you can assist these folks with their neighbors, if the neighbor doesn't do it, or doesn't do anything, we'll have them come up here and talk to them from here and see if that helps. And then, I mean, our next, I just want to be real cautious about trying to put a bylaw in. It's just going to get crazy. Sorry.
It's great, 2 Daniels Road. So your suggestion of speaking to him, that's already happened.
Okay.
Neighbor, where it almost came physical. He told him how it's affecting his entire neighborhood, namely his children who were up at 4 in the morning and had school. It was disruptive. So they did get rid of the rooster. The neighbor directly across the street from 19, he gets a rooster. After 2 weeks, 19 decides, hey, he's got a rooster, I got a rooster. So now we have 2 roosters. You know what I'm saying? So speaking to him did good. We were quiet for 2 weeks.
But the neighbor spoke to him.
The neighbor spoke to him.
So I think.
No, Lonnie just said, can't we speak to him?
No, I'm not asking you. I'm asking Kevin.
The animal control officer.
No, sorry. If that came out incorrectly, I apologize.
No, that's okay.
So what we're gonna do.
Because we're not willing to speak to him again.
We're gonna ask Kevin to see you and if he can connect with you and then speak with the neighbors.
And if that doesn't work, we'll have him here.
Thank you.
You'll have the rooster owners?
Yes, we'll at least ask them.
How's that?
And if they're listening, can you help out and quiet the roosters down at night? I mean, people are trying to sleep.
Put them inside. Bring them in the house. I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Oh, wait a minute, I have a hand up. Hold on, Coleman. Thank you. Coleman, are you there?
Sorry, my apologies. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I withdrew. My apologies.
No problem, no problem. Thanks.
All right, back to the budget.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys, and thanks for your patience.
Thank you.
Kevin, thank you. You're free to go as well.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Bye.
Okay, so the library has to fulfill 4 criteria with the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, governing body for libraries statewide. Every year, 19% of the budget must be spent on the purchase of new materials. The library must remain open a certain number of hours per week. The library must meet the municipal appropriation requirement as set by the state, and the library budget cannot be disproportionately cut in comparison to the adjusted municipal budget.
This is all state mandated, right?
Yes, yeah, all state mandated. Currently, we are spending 90% of the budget on materials. That hasn't been an issue. We are open the requisite number of hours, and the budget hasn't been cut disproportionately in comparison to the budget. Excuse me, the adjusted municipal budget, but we're getting perilously close to closing the gap with the MAR, municipal appropriation requirement. I think I mentioned that it was about 6,500 more in FY21 and FY22. That gap closed at 1,875. My belief is that this year we would actually be not within the municipal appropriation requirement. We would have to apply for a waiver. We haven't had to apply for a waiver for 6 years. Just a little background. The library, back in FY10, when all the cuts came down, the hours were cut from 57 hours per week down to 30. None of those hours have been restored. In FY20, we serviced 36,889 patrons in 8.5 months. FY10, 32,770 patrons in 12 months. There's definitely been a jump. There's been a jump in programming as well.
Sorry, can you just reiterate the hours again?
Hours back in FY10 were 57 a week. They've been 30 since FY11, so 12 years ago. Despite limited hours, community demand for the library services and programming remains high. This year, in terms of the budget, I've put the focus squarely on increased access for patrons. No operational lines are increased in this scenario outside of books. And that's to meet the 19% materials expenditure requirement, because if you up the hours of staff, you need to increase to 19% for the book requirement. Operational line amounts are adequate for FY23. I want to emphasize it's in the short term. But as I said, I'm looking to keep the budget focused squarely where it should be on the need for increased service hours. That means level funding of contracted services. If you look in the document, there is some explanation of what contracted services includes. Level funding of postage, telephone, lights, fuel, both of those I consider utilities, so pretty much one to me. Supplies, building maintenance, and meetings and dues under miscellaneous level funded and library programming level funded. I should mention with programming attendance nearly tripled from FY10 to FY20. That's noteworthy since we were closed for 3.5 months that year. In FY21, when almost all programming was held virtually, our attendance for programs was still 4,293, and that was more than a little under 1,000 more than attended programs in FY 2010. If you're familiar with virtual programming, it doesn't thrill people. So in the last full year of live programming pre-pandemic, we had almost 7,000 who attended library-held programs. As I said, I'm focusing on staff salaries this year. That's where the change in the budget is. We're looking to request 10 additional salary hours. That translates to 5 additional desk hours and open hours, since we have a circulation desk upstairs and one downstairs, so we have to staff that at all times. But we believe we can, through additional salary hours, through switching up some of the schedules, by my taking on a few more desk hours. We believe we can accommodate being open an additional 8 hours per week to the public. The schedule is under staff salaries. Currently, you can see that we're closed on Mondays, not a popular choice for anyone. Tuesday 10 to 7, Wednesday 10 to 7, Thursdays 3 to 7, Friday noon to 5, and Saturday 9 to noon. What you can see is it's all over the board. Nobody can ever keep it straight. They haven't been able to keep it straight for the last 12 years. And of course, that means 30 hours a week. We have conducted surveys, formal and informal, with patrons regarding the current hours of the library. They've replied that library hours are limited, hard to keep straight. They don't allow for visits after work, because once you get home from work at 5:30, you eat dinner and then suddenly the library is closed. 3 weekdays, there are no morning hours. Keeping this feedback in mind, understanding there may be minor changes to the scenario due to staff schedules, we propose the following schedule scenario. Monday 10 to 5, Tuesday 10 to 8, Wednesday 10 to 8, Thursday we would close. We don't find that Thursday 3 to 7 is particularly effective. We do get people in on Thursdays, but I wouldn't say it's a particularly popular day. Fridays 10 to 5 and Saturdays 10 to 2. That gives us a total of 38 hours open per week. So 8 additional hours, as I said. And let's see, what it does, obviously, it takes care of, or not takes care of, but at least addresses people's complaints about limited open hours, the inconsistency of the library's open schedule, where every day that we're open at 10 a.m. Additional hours on Tuesday and Wednesday for visits after work. Morning hours on 4 weekdays as opposed to the 2. Additional hour on the weekend, and shifting the weekend from 9 to noon to 10 to 2, because people have asked us if we could be open a few hours in the afternoon. Let's see. So to accomplish this, we'd be looking for 5 additional hours for library assistants and 5 additional hours for the children's librarian. Children's librarian is currently 19 hours a week. It would go to 24 hours a week. She's not seeking benefits with change in status, and I hope I'm not misspeaking, but my understanding is that has been, that arrangement has been granted in another department. She's the second in charge and the only full-time staff at the library. She has an occasional supervisory role when I'm away. She handles the lion's share of library programming, publicity, and social media outreach. As I mentioned, much of what has happened in terms of programming is doing no small part to her efforts. Nearly tripling of program attendance, as I mentioned. Let's see. Of course, as I said, the last year, FY19, that we had entirely live programming, we were up over close to 7,000. In terms of what that means to the budget, the staff amount would be an additional 10,115. I noticed on the spreadsheet that it says 11,565. So my question was if that number is related to the current FY 2022 or the budget FY 2022.
This is a roll-up number. It's what's in KBS. So it's a sum of whatever was put into KBS.
Right. So currently the budget for staff is 72,514. So the number I get is 10,115.
Okay.
More
So
than this.
whatever is in KBS, it's pulling right now,
Okay.
is 82,629.
Right. No, I'm just looking at the split out from the underline A.
So, right, we don't typically compare mid-year transfers for
Okay.
PAR and our STM. Our percentages or differences are based off last year's approved budget.
Okay, all right, that's what I just wanted to make sure. And then
So this number, this 82, is it 829 with the 11?
82,629?
Right.
Yeah.
Does that number include these additional 8 hours in here? Or?
You need the additional 10 hours.
10 hours.
Yes, 5 hours for library assistants and the 5 hours for the.
Yeah,
additional 8 hours for operating.
So it's been built into it already in this draft. right?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, you're talking about like the additional cost that would be associated with the 8 hours?
What I'm saying is the difference, if you were to put that in there, it looks like that, this additional 10 hours or 8 hours is already built into the draft that we're looking at right now.
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, your request is in.
Your request is already in.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly. Yep. Let's see, so, the total amount with the books amount, which is 1,031 over the previous, the current fiscal, brings us to 14,709 additional. That's compared to.
And you get more hours at the library.
Right, yeah, so we're basically turning what would be, 5 desk hours and 5 open hours.
Yeah.
8 open hours.
Yep, I get it.
So, back, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Did you say that we will need a waiver this year?
Not if the amount gets approved or you reach a certain level. I can tell you what the figure is. I don't mind telling you.
Yeah.
If I leave the figure to me. 287, 242 is what I believe the MAR will be for the year. So if we meet or
This is
exceed.
meeting, exceeding.
Yeah, we need to meet or exceed.
Alright, so if this budget is approved, then we don't need it.
Right.
So what you're saying is if we level fund it, we just need to wait.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yes, yeah.
Also, going back in my head, in 2008, was like during the cuts,
Yeah.
have we recovered to the point where that was like the highest level budget for the library? Do you know if we're meeting that number or exceeding that number now?
In terms of what the total budget was then?
Yeah.
I'd have to look that up.
But you did point that before the cut, you had 57 hours a week. Right now, the current year,
Right.
we're gonna go to,
Literally, half, not half, but close to.
we're gonna go up to, we'll go up to 38.
We go up to 38, so it's a start.
But the peak was 57.
Yeah.
So then I'd probably guess that we're not there.
Oh, no, yeah, this doesn't get us to 57.
No, we're talking about the budget back then.
Oh,
With 57 hours.
yeah, that's a great question. And I can take a look for, I can look.
Chief, are you looking up there?
I wasn't.
No, you don't. I don't think we need to know right now.
Well,
That's fine, I just was curious.
I thought you said you would.
I was looking up a number, so I want to talk about what you said about the part-time position. So that's not actually true. So I'm in full support and have it for many years of making the children's librarian full-time. But when we make a position over 19 hours a week, we have an obligation to budget for benefits. And we budget them at a family plan, which is the maximum plan, and then hope for the best, right? This most recent part-time person is now eligible and then declined this fiscal year, but is eligible in this budget because they were hired mid-year. So the practice is we budget for them no matter what. So it does add a cost to the position in concept in the budget, because ultimately it's a benefit to them that they should be eligible for.
Sure.
And so if she would like, or her family would like to have it, we would like to give it to them if they are a full-time employee. So we don't want to make them feel like it's a condition of their employment with us that they can't have it. So,
Okay, thanks.
Is there any adjustment that needs to be made to fuel, lights, things like that also?
I believe that we can be able to accommodate it this next year, the way that it's currently composed.
Okay.
But I can't say that for, 2024 necessarily. And I think, the two of the areas I think that are particularly get maxed out during the year of programming supplies. Those two areas particularly in the last couple of years, but, you know, obviously, juggling both from other lines and so forth. So, yeah, I believe we can make that work.
It will. We have, that has been a request for at least 4 years, at least. Same with the hours.
Questions? Are there any, Mike, can you just check to see on the
Yeah, sorry.
teams?
We might have, no hands, no questions at home?
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice, easy one. Easy.
Prove them, yeah.
Evening.
$210.
No progress.
Actually, look at it out there. I can't really see the sheet. Any class of use.
What about?
My name, so I can just see it from here. I can't see on the sheet. So my first one is salaries. That's showing a 7% increase. I think I broke down here to you that's truly not a 7% increase. 2% is probably a little over 2% is from the previous year. So that's the raises that the contract wasn't approved at the time. And then we put them in the fall special town meeting. That also includes some stipends and I can compare it to the change. We have steps for your first 5 years in the department. There's 5 steps. It's kind of like the teachers with their lane changes and everything, but those steps are 5% each year. So even though there's a 2% raise that year, it's always turned into 2 3/4 to 3% that we're actually increasing the salary line items. So out of that 7%, 6 of it is all salary, is all contractual. Really not much we can do about it. And the other percent is, when I looked at it, is pretty much posts. We had to add an internal affairs officer. I made a detective sergeant that we had to appoint in January of 2021. It was the end of December of 2020. The state passed in a bill really quick, fast, called the law enforcement post bill. And it changed a lot of law enforcement because of all the civil unrest. Uniformly, a lot of states did that. And they changed the requirements with our training, with our staffing, how we actually have to conduct business. And I don't think they thought about the financial implications, but now it's being passed down to the cities, towns, to come up with how we have to manage posts, because post isn't optional. You have to do things that they say. Like when we have internals now, we have to do internal investigations the way they want it done. We have to report everything to them. So we've had to actually create positions to make sure these can be carried out. Not that we didn't do them before, we just did them the way we would do them. And I think Mass is ahead of the curve in general. Most of the stuff we used to do is very similar to what we have to do now. They just put different timelines on and creates different costs for us, unfortunately.
Just, what was that in reference to, which line?
We're doing salaries right now because it showed a pretty big increase of 7%. So, so that's all contractual. There's really nothing in that 7% that shouldn't be there. I mean, if the previous numbers were there, I think it would show more of a 3% this year. So, previous raises from the contract negotiations. So, I don't know if anybody has any questions about salary line.
What was the bill called that the state shot?
It's post. It's called post.
Yeah, just a question on the overtime.
I don't think I'm there yet. I want to, that's okay. I just want to get each one for you.
I don't need just 2 questions of.
Yeah, I'll do this as you go, because I just want to make sure we don't miss anything. My salary, I think it shows in the 2%, so that's easy. That's just a 2% pull up.
Then
There's A2 salaries.
A2,
That's
that's a 7%. And then the 25% is nowhere at the overtime. So the overtime is showing at 25%. So that I can break down.
Well, before we go to the overtime, what's the difference between the? Oh, never mind. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a.
Yeah, right. Yeah, A1's my salary, A2 is all the salaries.
Yeah.
A3 is overtime. So this year, I'm requesting a 30,000 increase. 120 has been pretty set for the past 3 or 4 years. Part of that, I've just made do. But every time you add the 2% and the increases in the steps, the overtime doesn't go as far. If you're increasing salaries and stipends 2-3%, that's 2-3% every year less. I shouldn't be increasing my overtime every year 2%. I haven't, but I've got to the point where I can't keep sustaining the same amount with any type of increase whatsoever. So I was looking at least something for that, maybe 2 to 5% there. And then training, part of it is right now with post, there's a lot of training that we're going to have to do that is above and beyond what we normally do. But I've also now geared us more to different types of training now that I have officers doing that training. They've been more willing to go to other type of trainings like supervisor development that we've needed. And they're really picking it up now. But then there's replacement costs for that. So I don't pay them overtime for the training. We've negotiated where they do it time to time. They can take it off later, hopefully not to cost me overtime. But unfortunately, the new schedule, the trial schedule we're doing, we have a 3 and 5 schedule. We developed it during COVID to keep everybody kind of separate. Most of my shifts have to be filled. So long term, that's something I'm going to have to look at. If I don't get an increase in overtime, how to make the scheduling work.
So just looking at the actuals for 21 and for 20, they were below the 120. And now we're going to 150. So do you think the biggest driver is the schedule change?
I think training and schedule. The training that we're doing extra and the schedule are the biggest drivers.
Where are you at this point?
And then last year and the past 2 years, it's kind of deceiving with the overtime. We didn't fill as much because they weren't. So I spent that amount with minimally filling overtime. When they were working that 5 and 10 schedule that we had temporarily, they weren't taking any days off. So at the end of the year, what we did is all the time they were going to burn, we paid them out. I think we paid out close to $50,000 last year on salary and wages. So that $50,000, if I had spent it in overtime instead of paying out the days at straight time, that would have been a $75,000 hit that year in overtime. But the officers didn't want the extra time off. They were willing to take the flat rates, and it was beneficial for everybody. Because if not, that literally would have turned into 1.5 times what we paid out. So if you look at that year, that it was 75, and the year before, I have to look at the numbers, it's somewhere between 30 and 40 that year also that we did it. So even though we were below it, if I actually spent that money and didn't take our salary and wages that we had extra, it would have killed us. So I think you guys know for the past 4 or 5 years when I've been doing the budget, I try to be creative. I try to stay within my boundaries. It's very rarely I would go to, when you were the chair, to go to FinCom. I mean, I did when I had to, but I would try to stay within the bounds. But I'm getting to a point where it's just tough. It's tough to stay in there. This is my 6th year as chief, and I think I've stayed within those boundaries for 6 years trying to make it work. But I mean, now it's just getting to a point where I don't think I can do it. Again, I may have to look at scheduling or other types of things to do. Can't prove all of it.
Has it been budgeted at 120 for how long is that?
I think as long as I'm chief. Okay. I think it was actually a little bit more before I became chief, because we added a position that we were down, and when we did that, I made a reduction in the overtime because I was able to have the full-time staff to cover some of that. I think that happened 1 year when you were the chair. We were dealing with it. It was when we dealt with the school resource officer position. So
at some point, with that amount of overtime, does it make sense at some point to hire an individual?
You would think, but the amount of hiring you would have to do to save the overtime would be substantially more. Because now when you add an officer, they start out with a minimal amount of time as they go through their steps. now they create more overtime. So they get their time off. You look at a guy who's maxed out, he gets 25 vacation days, 11 holidays, 3 personal days. So it starts creating another problem too. And then that assumes that everybody stays healthy. And what I've learned as chief in the past 6 years, I don't think I've had 1 year so far with everybody healthy. And I look back through my career, and like you're a police officer, I'm starting to realize that I think you should need to stop planning every year someone being out for something.
Yep.
And that becomes a deficit. So even though I have 14 officers, including myself, I really mostly work with 13. And if I only had 13, I'd probably mostly be working with 12, would be more of a deficit than when you're on the shifts. Last year we had someone out, right now we have someone out. It's the nature of the job, unfortunately. It's a very physical job. It's the same thing with the fire department, I think. Chief Kessler goes through the same exact thing. I think since he's been chief here, he's had at least 1 or 2 people. It's just unfortunate.
overtime, you gain flexibility.
Well, the overtime, you have the flexibility to fill the shifts when you need to fill them, but then you don't carry the risk of another person going out. You don't carry the benefits. You don't carry the extra time off they would have. You don't have to pay retirement. You don't have to pay health insurance. So what you end up paying with that person, you don't end up saving. There's a fine line, and I think we're kind of there right now.
Might be good just at some point to do an analysis.
Yeah.
You're much more knowledgeable.
Oh, no. You have the right idea. A long time ago when Rich Schofield was on the board, him and I did an analysis, and we came up with a number of 15 officers and about 100,000 in overtime. So right now I'm about 1,400, 20, which isn't working. The 15th officer I didn't put in for this year. I put in, I think, every single year previously, but this year I just kind of gave up on it because I know the difficulty we've had with the budget the past 2 years. But realistically, someday I think we need to be at 15 officers. But again, the 15th officer doesn't save me that amount of overtime. It would be down more towards 100. Even though right now I'm asking for 150, I'd be more towards 100. So adding an $80,000 position saves you 50,000.
So just in the future, if it continues.
Yeah.
Question. So the training is required, I'm guessing someone in there.
They're going to find more and more.
And this is at the federal, state level, both?
Yeah. Federal, not so much right now. There's certain things federally we've always had to do, but at the state level, we're one of the states supposed to pass a new law enforcement bill, so we're one of the ones that we're dealing with. It was a knee-jerk reaction where I think they should have put more time into the bill and figured out where more funding would come from, but they didn't. It's kind of one of those things like they did a long time ago. They passed an education incentive for police officers, they paid 100%, and now they pay 0.
To be honest, too, that post bill, very knee-jerk reaction but we're lucky it was even smashed down to what it is.
Yeah, we're
paying way more money. And we might even not have any officers, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
The way that they started.
All right, so overtime, obviously that's open into our Quinn bill line. Eventually we would change that, just say educational incentive, because Quinn has been phased out with the retirement we had this year. And I'm planning on someone coming in with lower education. That could be more of a savings, but right now that's I definitely will save at least that much in the Quinn line item. I won't know until I hire the next person. Right now we're going through a hiring process. We had one back in the fall. We didn't have applicants that I wanted to pursue at the time. The sergeants are handling the process for me. We have another one coming up in the next month, so I'm hoping in the next 2 months to have a new officer on board. But they'll be significantly less, and depending on their education, will determine where that savings is. It could be double that, but I won't know until we hire them.
So is that a salaried employee that is providing education?
It's a salary employee that comes with education. So Windmill was the original education incentive for law enforcement. We would get 10% for associates, 20% for bachelors, and 25% for a master's above your base technical. As that phased out, we had to stay competitive because other towns adopted and kept it and paid the full 100%. Men that didn't, we just couldn't afford to. And we have an incentive now where it's 3, 5, and 8,000 depending on your degrees. So if someone comes to a master's degree, they're going to get 8,000 additionally a year on there. So it depends what level they come in. The past 2 officers that have come in, we had an associates, and then someone right now, our newest one has a bachelor's degree, but he's in a master's program, which will complete within a year. So a lot of the new programs are actually, they're going through all the way to a master's. They do an academy-based education through college, and they're coming out that way. So most of the new officers are coming out with degrees.
Question on A4. I think we skipped it, but it's 4% for the administrative assistant.
To the previous year, and I'm planning just 2 this year, if that's what you guys do across the board. I had to guess at something, so it's been 2 across the board for the past few years, so I'm just assuming 2. Obviously, that can change depending on what you did, but the other 2 wasn't adjusted from the previous year. Expenses. This is where the big numbers are coming in. So I increased building maintenance line, and again, these lines, I think we've talked about this year over year with the FinCom and the board. My lines, a lot of them don't make sense. They've been around for 25 years. I've been wanting to change them for the past 5. I think we're going into that new software. I'm going to be able to sit down with the town administrator and the finance team and reallocate how these lines work. Right now, I try to just put them where they figure they should be. And some of them don't even make sense. I know they're going to go over, and I know some are going to go under because they balance out the bottom line. I know what my whole budget is, but some of these are they just don't make sense. Building maintenance, that was easy to put into because it's a new building. I put an increase of $30,000, $31,000. It was actually $31,450, but I have some savings in other places that made it even $31,000. The HVAC alone is increased by $22,500 to maintain. It's 4 services a year. The system we have in there is over a $500,000 HVAC system for the new building. It's a $6 million building. I had 3 competitive quotes. This was the lowest quote. They were a local company in North Smithfield. They change the filters quarterly. We have, it's a high-tech system with fresh air that comes outside because we're a green community. So they really have to stay on top of it. I missed one of the cleanings and we were having condensation issues over there. I'm ready. So I'm going to have to do the quarterly cleanings on the whole entire system in the boiler system. And it's just expensive.
You don't have the air conditioners in the window anymore?
No, we don't. So the previous system we had about a 2,000 square foot building there with a home heating system, and I paid maybe $1,000 to have Joe's Oil Burners come and clean it once a year. So, I mean, that's where my increase is coming from there. The HVAC is just through the roof. We had a $5,000 system there. We have a $500,000 HVAC system here that I have to maintain. And I don't really know what to do with that. They're just putting forward. I mean, there's really not much we can do with that. Cleaning has gone up. The building is 3 times the size. There's more there to do. There's more there to clean. I think going up by $4,500 actually isn't that bad compared to what we were paying before. It's three times a week they clean it at an hour at a time, and it's a local vendor who does it. And then we have something that we have rugs in there now. The admin wing has rugs. The training room has rugs. I want to make sure we take care of those. We've had a habit of that building in '94, a few years before I got here. No one maintained it. That's why that building fell apart. I mean, it was high one to begin with, but we could have kept it a little bit nicer. I want to make sure that we don't have a general maintenance person here, so I want to stay on top of it and make sure this building stays nice. The little bit of money you put into it will save you in the long run. It's not cheap to replace stuff in municipal buildings and pay state wages for it. So that's where that increase came from. Any questions about the building maintenance stuff?
Hold on.
And then the only other item in the police budget.
Coleman has a question?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Lonnie. I do have a question. What are the requirements for competitively bidding the quote for the maintenance? I mean, it's a brand new building. You did identify that it's significantly larger and that it has been giving you some issues with condensation a while. But I am curious as to what the requirements for competitively bid that is. That went up 221%.
So I think I can answer the requirements. Is it's $50,000. Anything under $50,000, you have to seek 3 quotes. Anything over $50,000, you have to actually put out a physical RFP.
And I think anything under 25, you get 3 verbals. So at the time I got verbals originally, once I realized how high those were going, I ended up getting written from 3 companies that were recommended by the building company, the installers. The installers, correct. The installers, I would prefer to use them, but they're out of Seekonk and they don't service this area. So they gave other recommendations of people who could competitively do it. So, and that's something, you know, I'll probably look at it on a yearly or bi-yearly, you know, every 2-year basis, kind of like I do with everything else with our expenses. I think Mark's been in one time where I look at our phones and I rebid our phones and haggled with Verizon. He's been laughing on the phone because of bids from them. But I proactively try to get, you know, bids every 2 years. We're not stagnant in the police department and just assume we have someone who takes care of us and that's what we do.
And I mean, it's great you do that, but I also would say we don't always have to take the lowest bid. It's not always the best option.
Exactly.
Well, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, just to follow up, thank you. Yeah, I am curious. It just seems like maintenance required, you know, fairly quickly for a new building. I mean, it was appropriately sized for the building. I mean, I'm just kind of curious about the condensation. It's just a side note. I mean, you don't need to get into great detail, but to pay such a large amount for a fairly recent building is just interesting as a taxpayer. That's all.
I didn't do the quarterly. That's why we have I tried to save a little. I didn't do quarterly. I was trying to get away with half a year. And the filters can't handle the amount of fresh air that gets taken in from outside because we're a green air community. So as soon as you hit spring and summer, we have to take air from the outside and filter it into our system. If we had a closed loop, we probably could get away twice a year.
Correct.
But we don't, and we can't.
Thank you, Chief.
No problem.
Something that I mentioned to you, Chief, was, and obviously we can't fix this tonight, but in the past, we've had conversations with the school.
Yeah.
About
we did talk about that.
Working with one vendor to do schools, buildings, and then as we're updating our buildings here, we have the police station.
Yeah.
It may be worth revisiting that with them going forward to see if even Upton looping in their new buildings into one contract, maybe would save us.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I will try to set something up with the school district and maybe even Upton. I'll take on that. I don't mind taking on that. See if we can do some savings, you know, regionalize that a little bit. So.
Thanks. I think that's it.
Question. I training and travel. That I brought that up. I brought that up, increased it from 8,000 to 2,000 this year already. I've been trying to keep that line item pretty accurate. Printed out a budget today. I'm already over 4,000, and I still have 37 days of training left on that. That doesn't equal the cost for each one, but they're week courses, so that's probably at least another 8 weeks of courses. Some of them are paid. They're anywhere from 800 to 1,000. Some of the courses. So I know this year I'm going to hit the 10,000 mark. That's trying to be a best guess estimate. This year I'm going to go way over. Next year I think that's more of a controllable number. Once we get the people where they need to be, then it's going to be more maintaining and getting other people where they need to be. But training, we've always been in general subpar, and that's something I've always tried to build up. I've still stole it from other places in my budget to make sure we can train people, and that's something that I think now with the additional training, I don't have much of a choice but to ask me. So that's an ask on my part for training. It's just investing in our employees.
What is that, one cruiser?
No, that's a schedule that we've had for over 10 years now. So we have the fleet. That is actually, I'm still in 2 lease payments. So that is going to be 2 of the lease payments. And then I think I'm slated for replacement. I'm going to slate a replacement next year on one of the cruisers that's overdue. I was going to replace it this year, but with how short I am with the expenses, I've talked to Kim about this. I'm not going to try to take money from ask for the FinCom for money. I'm going to try to make it within my own budget. So I'm probably going to end up not replacing my cruiser this year. I've had mine 4 or 5 years. I can maybe even make it last another year. I'm up for a replacement, but I'm just putting mine off. And then I have 2 years left. Two more years left on the main fleet. So, and that takes about 45,000 of it. So, but by the time we pay those 2 years off, we're going to be due to replace a whole round of cruises again. So
This has been working.
this has worked. This has been great. This is, past 10 years, it wasn't like it was before. We'd have to go to capital expenses. We drive a cruiser 150,000 miles. We had one cruiser that you put the key in and turn it and drive around town, and you could take the key out and put it in your pocket and it would still run.
Well, that's,
And then
so they won't, they wouldn't.
it would until you left the keys at the station and you shut off the call. You're like, oh no. So you'd have to find like someone's butter knife and borrow it and turn the cruiser on. So that was the old S2, next to drive that one. But no, and it helps with morale too. When they drive decent cruises, I mean, no one wants to drive a cruise with 140,000 miles on it. It's just all beat up and torn up. And our 140,000 miles is realistically like 200,000 miles. We have a factor of like 1.5.
They used to be so then we used to repurpose the police cruisers to the fire departments, right?
Yeah.
And when we owned the car wash in in Milton, the fire chief came through, the transmission was so sloppy while it was going through the car wash, and the idle was so high in it, it slipped itself in the drive, it came shooting out the other end of the car wash with nobody in it, climbed the wall, was up on the wall.
Yeah, we used to.
So we should probably keep up with the new cruise.
Yeah, we
Circling back.
So that's it for police. I can move on to civil defense, and unless anybody has any general questions about police in general.
Means check. Oh, no, next level. Anyone?
Okay. All right, civil defense. So some of this is just right sizing line items. We only have.
What number is that?
Defense is 2. It's 299. I can't remember what the number is.
Dispatching?
No, it's
It's like 221, I think.
yeah, it's only 2 line items, so we always fly right by it.
It's
Emergency management is 291.
Oh, emergency, okay.
Sorry, 291.
Yep, right here. Ooh.
So with this, I took on emergency management as chief. I don't get any stipends or anything for it. I just run it. You need to have a department head run it. And at the time I was the fire and police chief, and then when the fire chief came on, he had enough to do. So I just kept it with a deputy director, who was a retired assistant chief on the fire department. It's gone from 400 to 30,000, so obviously it's a huge jump. Part of that is deceiving. The deputy director gets a $5,000 stipend per year to run emergency management, civil defense, for emergencies, grants. Every year he has a grant that's $2,800, so he pays for the portion of his salary by the equipment he gets with the town. That's always been taken out of dispatch. For some reason, we took it out of there, and we funded it in there because he was also going to sit at the desk at certain times to help back coverage. But now that dispatch is being zeroed out, I need to make sure that money's somewhere, so I wanted to move it into there for him. Then there's an additional 200 for stipends for his team that he has, so 7,000 should be in there, and should have always been in there, so I want to get that in there from dispatch. The ask I'm asking with this position in general is a $23,000 increase, and this would be taking funds from dispatch, but also to serve dispatch. Right now, we have Terry, who is in dispatch Monday through Friday, who is a shared administrative assistant between the fire chief and myself. She has about 20 hours of police work that she does and 20 hours of fire department work that she does, but she maintains a desk area there. So when people come into a brand new station, they see someone at least Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. When she takes days off, like she's taking a day off tomorrow, she has days off she takes, I have no one to backfill it. I have no budget to backfill it. So we have days during the week that aren't going to be backfilled. I would use civil defense. He has reasons to be in the station and work on plans for this town. He could backfill. And at a rate that we used to pay the previous dispatchers. So I want to change it. The rate we used to pay the part-time dispatcher was $25 an hour. So that's what I'm basing this $23,000 on to backfill him. The vacations she takes, if she takes a week off, if she takes a day here or there, if there's sick time, then the storm coverage. So when the town hall closes, usually administrative assistants are off too. And it'd be nice to have someone in there to help manage the storms. That's what Chief Kessler and I have talked about, that we don't have that person anymore to do that. We used to utilize dispatch, which was kind of cheating, but it really wasn't their responsibility to do that. They were busy dispatching, but we were able to cheat for a while when we had dispatch. So it'd be nice to have someone there during storm coverage. And then additionally, we need to develop an emergency plan for this town. We haven't had it. We've winged it about 25 years I've worked here. We've done well with it. We have great managers between the police and fire department, and our department have been able to manage it. But I think with emergency management, we're at the stage now with the natural disasters that happen on a regular basis around here. It seems like we need someone developing plans for us. So part of the work would be willing to go in there on weekends, extra weekend coverage for the station, and additionally he would work on his emergency management duties and responsibilities. So I'm trying to multitask him and use him in a regional way.
So David, this number that went 430,000, that's taken out of the dispatch line item and moved over here?
That's where I would like to take it from. The 7,000 was in dispatch, so that makes sense that should move. The 23,000 is a request for backfilling Terry's position and adding additional weekend coverage and storm coverage, natural disaster coverage in dispatch.
But there is an additional body, so to speak, because you always had a dispatcher in dispatch, and now we're Metacom. You have this person there during the day, when there used to be a dispatcher, and now they're somewhere else.
Right.
But there's still a great savings from the regionalization, which is.
Yeah, over 10 years, we're saving this year alone $500,000 from regional dispatch.
So you're saying 23,000 comes from the savings from.
Correct. If we could take some of that savings to reinvest in, and another deficiency that I've managed for the past 5 years, that I think this would be the opportunity to actually take some funds we have and make sure emergency management actually works the way it should work in other towns. In other towns, it actually does work like this. We've kind of skimped, and we've had Mark McKino, a retired assistant chief, who does a lot of his own. I mean,
Yeah, well, the only thing I was going to comment when you said that, we should have an emergency plan and pay them, I think we really have had some emergency plans, a whole bunch of people that always did it, they just didn't get paid for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just now.
And it only lasts so long too.
Right.
All the volunteers you have eventually leave.
Right.
And then you're reinventing the wheel over and over instead of keeping an employee who manages it. And I'd say Mark has been one of the best ones we've had since I've been here. He does an excellent job. And the stuff he does now, he does above and beyond if he doesn't get paid for it. And he doesn't even complain
A lot of people don't know, he was an EMT paramedic, and then he was a cop here for a while, and then he did a different part of the country, came back and fire, so he's really experienced all the way around.
And he lives 3 houses down the street. So if you need him in a storm, you can just walk to the station to maintain the coverage. And Fire Chief and I were talking too, it'd be nice when you have a bad storm and you have poles down and you have small fires going on, and you have, trees on houses, someone to manage all this with National Grid, with Verizon. Dispatch does the best they can, but they put a call in and that's it, and that's where it ends. That's what our own dispatch used to do too. But I mean, we're lucky we haven't had anything. 10 years ago, we had that bad storm where Bellingham Street didn't have power for a week. And there were poles laying down the road for a week. We're bound to have something like that happen again. We're just lucky right now.
What was that?
Yeah, hi, Lonnie and the rest of the board. So it sounds like the chief is describing a civil defense director of sorts. And it sounds like that he's talking about all the compliance that's required with that. I mean, I'm in no position to identify if this person is qualified, but if this is requesting a new individual to take on these tasks, I guess the question is, isn't this a bigger question than just kind of allocating resources to a problem and to how to identify that? Sounds like a bigger issue that he's describing. The question is if the board should be considering a civil defense director of sorts.
Well, I am the emergency management director, and I have been for 5 years. I've just been underfunded for 5 years, and he's always been my deputy director. Because when big emergencies happen, half the time I'm on the road dealing with it too. Most emergency management directors are usually at the police or fire chief, because they're a full-time employee. Any liability you want to fall under your full-time employees. So I've always taken on the task, and I've done it for free. Most towns, they both get stipends. I just do it because I think it's important in this town. I'm not looking for anything myself. He does a lot of the legwork. I think we need to expand with him instead of relying him on free most of the time.
He did that when he was on the fire department.
Correct. When he was on the fire department, Chief Warren was there. Chief Warren was emergency management director as a dual chief, and he did a lot of that through the fire department. But he was paid through the fire department too, so they paid him overtime, they paid him other things, and he's just continued to do it because he's one of those men and people that just loves the town. It's just the type of guy he is, and I hate to lose someone like him. Right now, he works for the zoo, and I mean, he does a lot of hours there, but if I could grab him over here more, it'd be nice.
Again, I go back to the board and I just ask, is it something that you're looking to look at a long-term, compliance and looking to look at this individual for these roles to fill certain responsibilities? That's all I'm asking. If we're putting $30,000 or $35,000 towards this.
23. The 7's already there.
Coleman, what the chief was explaining is that when we move dispatch out of town to the regional dispatch, we have somebody who needs to be in the station presence. What we're doing is taking that person and putting them in there and having a role of being, basically to be there. If somebody comes in and needs it, but at the same time is doing some of that work at the same time, and that's kind of doubling up, but that's how we're putting that placeholder in there, and we're taking money from the dispatch money that we saved to move it into that area. And he's already well established and experienced in that location.
And I've always
answered your question or not.
I've always needed that extra money. I've requested in the past. I've always been told not going to happen. But I figured this is the opportunity to get it to happen by using him as a dual purpose, kind of like we do a lot of things around here. We try to find dual purposes to justify the reason for the expense instead of just originally the expense would have just been to have him on in that position.
Okay, just a question to the board, whether we're using, the resources in ways best for that meet the town's needs. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions about that?
I just want to add to that because Mark has been doing this work and has shown value to the community. And so by investing this money in that position, it's only going to help even more. And I do feel that we need to ensure that there is more hours in emergency management, especially, as you said, with more and more large weather events.
In the first two years when I became chief, we were able to slide a little bit of that too. He was still employed by the fire department, and I was paying him through the fire department to do a lot of the stuff he was doing. Right. In the past 3 years, he's been getting the $5,000 stipend, but still doing all the work he was doing before. But it's at the point where, I think he's finding other stuff to do, and I don't blame him. So this is the point where do you keep the talent that you have, or do you let them go somewhere else, and then we start all over and we're doing the same thing and hiring someone without a background.
And this goes to the point that we're saving money in dispatch, regionalization, and we're using funds for that.
And to supplement dispatch.
And he's still doubling up because he still has a presence in that building, so that when somebody comes in, he's there instead of being on the monitor.
Right. We're still dark at night, so like you're looking at that right now, it's still you get to talk to the camera. We're still dark on the weekends. It's just getting that little bit extra coverage. Now being in there for over a year, it would be nice, when Terry's not here, like tomorrow, to have someone that could step in and fill that. It would be nice on the weekends when normal people are working during the week. They go into the station during normal hours, and there is someone there to greet them and deal with them and help certain some of the other things. And it takes off the officers coming off the road and doing things that they would normally do. So it's utilizing manpower for the police department too. Using, manpower there also.
Further questions? More online? Nope. Nope.
And then 299, Lonnie's dispatch, I've zeroed everything out except $10,000 in expenses. And we still do have, even though we've gone to regional dispatch and we're saving $500,000, we still have some expenses that we have to bear. We have radio licensing. We have the town-wide notification system that we use during emergencies. Sometimes the Board of Health uses it. We have that invoice we pay every year, I think, that's somewhere around $4,500. We have a code red alert system that we work with the school to maintain. If there's an emergency there, it's set up that, God forbid, in Mendon actually has something happen there, whether it's a medical or an actual true emergency, some type of thing that, you don't even want to talk about. Every computer is set up where if someone's in a room, they can start typing what's going on and it goes to our crews. And we're linked with the cameras there. So we've worked with the school really diligently over the past 5 years to develop a plan over there in case anything happens. I mean, obviously, that's one of our most important buildings, 2 buildings that we have, and part of the fees that dispatch covered was paying for those type of services that we had over there.
Should we move it out of dispatch and put it up somewhere in the rest of the budget just to get rid of this section?
I debated that, but they really are related to dispatch, so I don't know, because eventually you're gonna have to fund something in dispatch when we pay for dispatch. The first 5 years, we're paying nothing in the first 3 years to Metacomet. Then we start paying 25% year 4, 75% year 5, and then a capped amount we have for year 6, 7, and 8 that the town administrator and I negotiated. So eventually we have to have a line item in dispatch that pays for Metacomet. So I thought this would be a good placeholder for it anyways.
I want to leave it because when we get further down in the budget and we start debating about why we have excess money and where it should belong, I think it needs to be shown that through regionalization efforts and things that we continue to do to become more efficient, we are creating space in our budget to add things and try all of that rather than cut.
And again, we're gonna have to fund it someday. We're gonna have to fund some portion of it, not merely what we used to.
But it's a line item now, it's not a budget.
Right.
That's all I'm saying. I mean, maybe at some point we can.
Make it a line item.
It's not a discussion.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I don't know, maybe with the new software, make it a line item in the police expenses, something like that.
$500,000, but I only see like 200.
The grants aren't shown in there, so every year we had $180,000 that in grants that were there. So we paid, there was our share like $420,000 to run dispatch. We had $180,000 grant.
Yeah.
So you'll never see any of the benefits either. We had 5 dispatchers at $20,000 a piece. There's $120,000 in benefits you'll never see. So there's other things that were in other line items. Once we buried it, we did the cost analysis. Chief Kessler and I, when we were negotiating this with the selectmen and the boards, it's a little over $2.5 million over 10 years that we saved with this regionalization effort. And it's been implemented well. The officers enjoy having dispatch that's regional. I was afraid they were going to miss having our own dispatch, but it's different. They said that it's more of a professional feel to it because you have professional dispatchers who are doing it. It's tough to get in small towns professional dispatchers. They have 8 dispatchers on at a time. They have 25, 26 employees that are dispatchers. They have a dispatch supervisor. They have a dispatch director. So it's just a different feel, and they do an excellent job. I've been happy with them.
Do you want to talk about dog officer? I put the latest number in.
That's, if you want, we've been going back and forth on Zoom. That's something else.
It's going to be.
We've worked on it together.
It's going to be substantially more money, but the service is going to be increased potentially. Right now, there's 1 shared officer and a part-time officer which was supposed to be just 5 communities, and then they added 4 communities. So we have an agreement that was in place with us with 3, and then they've added everybody else in the region. So
Uxbridge runs it, so Uxbridge.
Okay, so
Yeah.
no. Basically, what they're saying right now, they're already servicing these other communities based upon stipends already.
Okay.
So we have an agreement in place, and there's these other towns that Kevin is also servicing right now in the system with the 1 shelter. So what they're trying to do is create 1 big regional one and actually professionalize the service. And that would be hiring 3 full-time, 2 vehicles, continuing to use the Blackstone shelter, but actually have a regional.
It's a work in progress. So
Right,
the last meeting that we had last week,
Right,
they
so
talked
I
about
put-
cutting up with the employees,
So
cutting out vehicles.
Right, and so I put an estimate, every time, it's gonna change up until when we go, but it's going to be more, potentially double, but the service should be double, in theory.
Chicken officer?
Yes.
Not a rooster.
The good news is too that, I mean, if we look at the cost of what the dog, well, we call it dog officer, but is that really kind of, no, it's not animal control, that's through the Board of Health, correct?
Yeah.
So, or,
We're gonna do regional animal control, I think is what we call it.
I don't think that 24 number is gonna be, once they readjust it. with the
Yeah,
same,
this
I
is,
just-
this is his current.
I think that's the
Chief
worst
in
case.
Oxford is handling the current analysis, and this is his latest number for our.
I just want to say that no matter what, it's still a very low cost.
Oh,
Yeah.
For what we
Besides having
have to
a-
pay, if we had a single
Oh,
one.
right.
Yep. And for me, any questions?
Do you want to do the tree warden too?
I don't want to be the tree warden. I don't want the details for the highway department.
I'm sorry, any
Try and make
other-
me do.
Any other questions from at home?
Mike, you got a question over there? I can see you on the couch.
He's asleep.
Do we have that document and everything come?
Yeah, it should be.
You're in the folder.
Okay. Yeah, I sent all that over. Oh, yeah.
All right.
We're
Fire.
going to- All right, fire. You get 10 minutes.
I can do it.
Morgan.
We still have three.
So I did send out the budget update to both the board and the committee. I'll just very quickly go through it. Our career people work 48-hour work weeks. We need to cover 2 positions 24/7. So that requires 7 career positions in order to have 2 firefighter EMTs or paramedics in the station. We're currently authorized at 6. So there's been 48 hours a week that we've been having to fill with either part-time people or on overtime. As Chief Kersey mentioned early on, since I've been here, we have not been at our full FTE for the fire department due to injuries. As a matter of fact, we had, for almost 2 years, we had 2 of the career people out. So we were trying to fill 144 hours. We ended up having to hire per diem people to do that. But they were only for the ambulance and not for fire. So we're kind of short servicing the town by not having 2 firefighter EMTs or medics in the station. Now that those injuries are being resolved, we did hire a couple of new people and with the steps, you know, at an entry level, it's a little bit lower. So between that and the savings from the call or the part-time personnel and the overtime, I did the calculation that you had mentioned earlier about the overtime. It just makes sense, in my opinion, to hire that 7 person. And as you can see from the numbers here, by doing it, it's really a savings in budget. In order to cover those 48 hours a week, I'd have to add a little over $16,000 next year if we don't hire this person. I do understand that there is an increase on the benefit side. But as I mentioned in the memo, a few of our last hires are opting out of health insurance, which does, and I get it that you still have to carry that because at any point in time, it could change your mind. But I think between what we're able to do with the budget in here and some of those savings that we're paying for the 7 positions, essentially within the budget. The operating expense side, you can see that there's some lines that have gone up. Some of them, it's been mentioned earlier about just increasing costs. You know, I use the gloves as an example, and that is not an exaggeration. That's real costs. They went from $75 to $450 a case. There's somebody in the world getting very rich on some of these things, but they're starting to drop back a little bit, but we can't plan on them going back to where they were. And I think we're just seeing some of those costs elsewhere. So we were fortunate that one of the personnel that we hired is an experienced paramedic, and I kid him because he really is OCD. We were able to take him to do our QA/QI, which we're required to do through our medical control with Milton Hospital. So he's doing it in-house, which saved us. You know, we were able to take $8,000 out of the budget that we were paying an outside consultant to do. So we're using that savings to offset where we have to increase due to additional costs.
So this reduction of 58,000
and changing call services, that's where that person comes from, or is that overtime that you're saving?
It's a little bit of both. So when we were filling with all these per diems, yeah, it's kind of, it's a little hokey in a way, the way that these accounts are, because we do get some money from, not workers' comp, but disability, from our insurance company to offset the salary. That goes as a credit into the full-time salary line. But we have to fill those shifts with overtime and part-time. Now, if I have a career person filling the shift, that goes into overtime. If we have a per diem or an on-call person filling the shift, it goes into on-call. So that's why the on-call dollar amounts have been so high the last couple of years, because we've been trying to do it as best we can. Of course, having to keep under the 19 hours a week average, which has been kind of constrained as well. But yeah, so a little bit of savings in overtime and a lot of savings in the call salary is what's going to be dropped into the full-time line.
I guess I just had one question. Assuming this extra person gets approved as a full-time position, you see that as going into the future, the next 2 or 3, 5 years, that will be a full staff? Don't see many.
Yeah. When I first came here, it was my opinion that if we got 2 people 24/7 plus the chief and the station Monday through Friday, that was sufficient. Honestly, even with COVID, our call numbers have been creeping up a little bit, which is a little bit surprising. But we're also getting caught. We're going to go through another recruitment program for on-call personnel from town. But with these multiple calls, and I'll use the example just a couple of days ago, motor vehicle accident, surprise, at the lights, and at 7:30 in the morning. It was 7 minutes later, a fire alarm comes in for the middle school. And I was in the shower at home, getting ready to come to work, listening to this. They hit the tones once, nobody came. They hit the tones a second time, I'm scrambling to get dressed. We had to call a Hopedale engine because our 2 on-duty guys were there. So in the last year or so, I've come to the opinion that probably an appropriate level of staffing, understanding that this is a small town, would be the 2 people 24/7 and then a chief and 1 other person daytime Monday through Friday. So that when our on-call people who are primarily available nights and weekends are not in town because they have their normal jobs Monday through Friday, we have that extra person around so that when there are the multiple calls, we can cover them. And also if we don't have a lot of building fires, but when we do, it's a 2 in 2 out rule, NFPA rule, and now that we're in essentially an OSHA state, if we send 2 people in to attack a fire, we have to have 2 people outside unless there's a life safety issue. But even if there's a life safety issue, you're sending 2 people into a very dangerous thing. And if we don't have people outside, it's a risky job. I get it, but it makes it even worse when you're throwing 2 guys in, nobody out. We've tried to counter that lack of personnel. We do have, I'll call it automatic aid from Uxbridge and Hopedale, where when somebody calls and says, my house is on fire, we get dispatched. But then our dispatch will also call Hopedale for an engine and a tanker, and Uxbridge for an engine and a tanker, and actually Millville for a tanker. So we can get 16 people on scene, which is what the NFPA standard is, within, it's a 14-minute time frame. So we put agreements in to try and do it, but I think, for both the service to the town and the safety for us, I'd like to see 8 career people and the full-time chief. Probably won't happen before I retire, but that I think is, for today's world, the adequate stuff. This will just get us much closer.
Do you track events? Like, would you be able to show data over time to help justify that?
On the calls? Yeah, we could produce reports. So when we go out and do a call, this is all the federal government watching everything we do. We have to submit through Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Fire Incident Reporting System, which then goes to the National Fire Incident Reporting System.
I can pull calls by day, a week, by hours within the day. So yeah, I can provide.
I assume so.
That's one area you can get all the data that you want, and probably more than what anybody wants. I am curious, though, Chief, in the 5 years since you've been here, I'm wondering, if Ellen's still not on, I'd love to know what the population in town has changed to, because I mean, we're doing a lot of building, more people moving to town, you know, I'm just wondering.
You know, it's increased enough to require a second precinct, right? So.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably like 12 people or something.
Right.
Ridiculous.
Still all at the same place.
Yeah, right. The same
Still
rule.
in the
You
same
gotta use
building.
that machine.
But we need a second voting machine.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering if that's a driver of it.
It's partially a driver, and honestly, and we also, because every town's in the same boat, and I haven't looked, to your point, look, yeah, I'd be interested to see what we're doing outside now on mutual aid. 4 years ago, the department wasn't getting called a lot outside for mutual aid. That's starting to happen. So we get a lot of mutual aid. We don't have a ladder truck, so we rely on these other people. You just heard me on a reported building fire. We're getting 3 other towns coming to help us out. So we do go outside and help the other towns as well.
Well, I just have to say, I'm sitting here smiling because from before you came here to what I'm hearing from you now, just makes me feel so much better compared to what we were dealing with in the past. So I really thank you for all you've done.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just real quick, just because I received an email from a member of the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee was copied on, so I couldn't respond due to open meeting law, but I promised that I would just cover these questions tonight. One of them was, and in previous documents, I mentioned these items, an automatic CPR unit, which was on our list when we first came here. We were able to acquire that about a year ago. It's been used more than several times. Unfortunately, we don't have a save yet with it, but we were able to get that. We got that utilizing CARES money, actually. We did find out that I found out a lot of departments around us were buying stuff like this that through the CARES money, because it helps us not have that contact with the patient. So, you know, we can just put the thumper on and we can be hands off and just kind of, shouldn't say hands off, but we're doing the medication stuff. We don't have to keep rotating people. So that's how that was purchased. Ice rescue capabilities, we did buy, they call it the banana boat, but the official term is a rapid deployment craft, or an RDC. That is a device that can be used both in water and on ice and over snow, much better than the boat with the motor that we had, and a sled that wouldn't fit on the truck. So our capabilities are much better today. We do have guys that are doing academy training in ice rescue. And while we don't rely on Uxbridge for that initial response, honestly, I would probably call them anyways, because if there is somebody in the water, because we should just have that backup. I mean, I'm a fan of expecting the worst to happen, to plan for the worst. So while we don't rely on, I would still call them. And we talked a little bit about the personnel and what I see in the future. Future budget stuff, I mean, we have equipment that just needs to be replaced on a somewhat regular basis. Cardiac monitor really has a lifespan of about 7 years. It's a $30,000 expense. We just bought one. I think it was 2 years ago that we bought it. We've had it a year and a half years, so 5 more years, we'll be looking at a $30,000 expense. I can put this stuff together, a schedule together, and then forward it through the administrator to the board and finance committee. And that's all I had on those questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Good.
All right. Any questions from home?
All right, that wraps up. But do you have any more business?
I just, so a lot of the doctors, not all of them are already up there now. Apologize for that not being there. And as they come in now, they'll be there. So it wasn't, the fight was getting the budget spreadsheet up there, and I got lost on the other stuff. So they're there now, and we'll make sure that they're, the other part too is if somebody had emailed me earlier and was having a problem getting into it. If anybody's having a problem with accessing it, just reach out to me right away, and we'll make sure you get taken care of.
You talking about in the folder?
Yep.
I did too from work, but that would have been something worth locking.
All right, if you want to give me a call tomorrow, sometime, just so we can look at it together, you can, you should be able to check it. Not that you want to look at that spreadsheet on your phone, but we can at least check the access that you're getting.
I mean, I would be able to download the file.
I need it 3 times.
It says, yeah, it's a zip file.
No, definitely not yet. Let's check it out. Give me a call tomorrow if you like. All right, or anything.
I mean, I think I'll try to get it.
Thanks, guys. And, yeah, like I said, it'll all go.
I don't think we have any other business, right? Motion to close. Second.
All right, you guys at home? So the FinCom just voted to close their meeting. Mike and Jack.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, and Nick, sorry, you were hiding. Thanks, everybody. I don't know if you guys heard me, if you have any trouble accessing those folders, please reach out to me right away, okay?
Will do, Don.
Very much.
You said the budget might change. Is that gonna be, we gonna know that, you've done that? So does it alert us?
What, no,
But like the live document, they don't use
No,
that, not to
it's-
do something.
oh,
So what we had discussed, so you guys know why something's changed in there?
Yeah, that's what I was just asking. The argument made this suggestion, is like, we might not approve that, and that might not be something we need to discuss.
Right, I understand, and I think that I just need to look at the process a little better. I think that I need another, like an email budget group that maybe we can have the department heads when they send the documentation over. That way, they don't have to send it to 3 different groups. I can put the groups within.
Let's talk about this. Our vision here, of how this works, right? So we're all here, we go through all these things, and then at the end of it, the board decides what's gonna stay in this document, and then final, you'll know, this is our final budget. And then you folks will talk through all of those additions, whether or not your approval of this expenditures is there.
I mean, the great part of doing this multiple times is it saves you that much time at the end. Because
Well, the been part of the conversation.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I point you guys have to do a recommendation and then do a budget hearing. And the more that you are aware of what's going on, in real time, the less time it takes you to go in, because you've already been there on the process. Which is what we've been trying to do. This new budgeting software that they purchased and have up running to make it even better.
but timing wise, these guys won't actually know how much money they have available until mid-March, because we won't have the school's final numbers until then. So they can say now, yes, we were in support of everything we heard tonight, but the fact is the budget could come in and then they have to vote on what they're gonna include and not include, and then they'll send that over.
And even that at the school, it's not, there's outside forces for them. It's just-
Right, they wait for numbers to come in, just like we do.
If the governor votes and doesn't vote.
Yeah, I'm more than sympathetic to the fact that it's a process and things continually change over time, but that doesn't mean that people need to go dark. It will mean, come out at the end. So, yeah, and I also don't want updates every 4 minutes. Right? So,
Now you don't want it.
there's always a balance. Always a balance.
All right, thanks, guys, appreciate it.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Town hall.
So, much like I mentioned that some
Yeah, sorry.
previous STM or ATM, there are costs, additional costs related to the well that are coming down the pipe, work that is related to it for leveling out the ground in order to get access. company that we are going with, Richardson, currently doesn't have, the plan that they have designed for the MVP and all, it doesn't provide them the access that they need to get back there to drill on the site. So there may
Over
be.
here?
Over here,
In that back corner over there?
yes.
They
So
can't get
they're
there?
gonna come out, they're working with McClure, with an engineering firm, to figure out what might have to be done, how to get the access to do the thing, okay? And the good news is, as you know, it came in lower than the amount that we asked for and was approved at the meeting, so we have the funding.
But hey,
The well thing.
you're talking about this in the,
Yeah,
in a corner of the lot.
they need I don't know, 40 feet access, and so many feet, 20 foot, it's like some specs that they don't have because of the slope of the ground back there.
We need that. In other words, their equipment,
So we need to add something to the well project. So they didn't separate the old station line from the new station. Thought they did.
you and I talked about this.
They didn't do it.
Didn't do it.
Figured it out today, and even worse, there's multiple lines that go into the new police station. So I had Barry Idaho come out and shower the water down over there, so we're gonna get flooding with freezing. Luckily, Lieutenant Blanchett was in to take in something from the attic, just moving some stuff out. You heard water
Oh, no.
coming out of the bathroom, just spraying. I think because everything unthawed. The lines broke, there's all water. It's about 2 inches of water in the cellar, so I went home, had a whole hazmat suit on, had galoshes down there, figured out this. So they teed it somewhere over here, which is fine going to the old, police station. But there's tees somewhere on the line that water comes in from different spots. So the cells get water from one spot, the bathroom gets
You mean it's
water.
not all interior?
No, because the well was shut down and power was off, and there was still water coming into the bathrooms over there.
Is that,
So what I did, I shut everything off down there. I cut a few pipes. I'm going to Depot tomorrow to get some stubs. And I'm going where the wall is on every one of them, Sawzall, and I'm capping them all off because they're all 5 feet underground, so nothing can freeze at that point.
so in other words, there is one line going in, but you don't need all those other feeders now.
Yeah.
Get rid of the-
Well,
Because you don't need the.
yes, they teed it. There was one line going to there, but then somewhere underground, they decided that instead of just going one line to the building, they went one to the bathrooms, they went one to the cells, and they went one to the kitchen area, somewhere underground.
This might be a dumb question, but
And the old
was that wasn't for the design though, right? Couldn't have been designed that.
No way.
The old station?
So if they didn't follow the design,
Wait.
they're going way back.
What are we talking about? There's water to the new station or the old station?
So when you tap off this well, on the ground there's a T.
Yeah.
And the T, if I shut it off, I can shut the water off there, but it shuts off the whole building. T's underground. That's how it was designed to connect it, because when we take down the building, they were gonna dig it up and take off the T. But now off of that T, there's T's somewhere in the ground feeding everything else, because we thought we should shut off the well and shut down the pump, and there's still water somehow going to the toilets are frozen right now.
Okay.
So, but I'm gonna go in there tomorrow, I'm gonna go to Depot and I'm gonna cap them all off. I was gonna have the plumber come out, but he's sick and he's in quarantine for a little bit, so I'm just gonna take care of it. We'll save money between anyways, I'm just gonna get parts.
We're going to not get down.
It just seems that if it was designed and it was not built to design, that.
Well, it might not be finished because you're right, when.
Yeah, because when you take it down,
We're gonna then dig it back up to finish to straighten it out. So-
Exactly.
When, all right, so anyhow, all right. And then they need some special thing for the well over there, fine. All right.
Within
Let's cruise on, thanks.
Well, we approved 50,000, the quote came in at like 23, so we've got some room there. But I mean, if we have to go back to town meeting or go to FinCom reserve, right, so be it. I mean, that's,
the two pots of money that we got from the state, this is one of the things that Ari was asking me about.
Mhm.
One of them was specifically for this, right?
for the police station.
It was two $50,000 grants. One of them, he told me, was for that, for the water department and that, the meter pit at Cape Road and Hartford Ave. And the other one I thought was for
The town hall well,
the town hall well.
it might say campus, but yeah.
Well, we can't.
Well,
So that's without us taking money, so that money's there for that purpose.
right now, like I said, I'm confident right now, we have funding that we can handle this all in-house. but it is evolving, right? So I might have to issue, I said to, I replied in the email, you know, if we have to get quotes on doing, go get them. I don't want, because we also have, as you know, the MVP grant that we are doing the landscape of back here. And they're in the design, they're in the design phase, they need to deliver us a product, and if the well can't be put where it's supposed to be put, or any of that, we have to.
Well, and if there's money for that landscaping, that building, can we use some of that to build that up, if we have to build something up over there?
No, it's design.
Oh, it's just design.
I don't.
I just don't see
What they
why-
gotta do over there, I can't imagine what, it's anything ridiculous. I mean,
Right,
I just, it's so weird to me, because like when we build a new house,
Hey, you
the
just
guy comes
take
in
the
with
bulldozer.
sideways when he comes in, he straightens it out and then drills a hole. So I'm confused on what they need to do, but I'm gonna stop because
send it to you.
I need to read it. to understand.
You can get out your compass or whatever we call that thing to do the angles and what.
I'll come unhinged.
No, don't, that's what we don't.
Yeah, all right.
For a well.
And the water board does know.
The well? Dan is part of the emails that I am on. He's been one of the, me and him as points of contact for the well, so yes.
The $50,000 earmark there,
Mhm.
do we know if we have
Look.
a contract signed for that? with the State,
I don't know.
because we should make sure.
That was, well, Mark, the question that Brian Murray was asking me was, did we get the money then? Because he said, we
Yeah.
should have the money. And because Milford had some kind of issue to get straightened out. And then he said, if, and he wanted to know if we had it. And I reached out to Jody last week. And she initially didn't know, but she was finding out. So, and she was gonna reach out to Milford too, because they just went through. So.
Yeah, we're gonna.
That's the point. Do we have it?
I move to approve the renewal of the seasonal licenses for George's Surf and Turf at 116 Oxford Road and the Men and Driving Range at 37 Hastings Street, pending receipt of positive routing slips.
Second.
Aye.
Yeah, I don't think so. I just
Opening
see-
town meeting warrant.
I move to open the warrants for the annual town meeting on May 6th, 2022 at 7 p.m.
Second.
Okay.
Wait, no. It's oh yeah, so it's gonna be back on Friday night, right? Oh, great.
Says the only person ever, oh, great.
Well, I didn't want to do 7 to 7 to 10 a.m.
That's
again.
right.
Because if it's that same temperature, that would have done a nightmare.
All in favor?
All right,
Tom,
what's that means?
That's
I
right,
have-
that's right.
Did you send that to everyone?
No, I have a newsletter compiled of all the things that I was sent and I formatted it. I don't think it really matters what it looks like at this point. I think we just need to get something up on the web because it's for the first quarter of this year. I anticipate we're gonna do another one before town meeting. So, you know,
I just was like.
it's open on my desktop right now. I'll forward it to you. Everything I have.
Some of it was like, come on.
It is, but it's informational, right? Which is what people wanted.
Really want to use the example. I'll tell you after we.
I'll,
see it.
You're not in my
I'm gonna-
formatting, that's the only thing I did, you're like,
No,
it looks
well,
like
that part
like
of
a
it too,
trial.
the material.
It's fine, I mean, it's,
Most of it's good.
you know, I'm
Well,
sending,
I need to talk about that.
take a look at it, if you're okay with it, we'll get it on the web, okay? It's really, it's what we got. We can keep updating it, I
Yeah,
mean,
hopefully it just progressively gets better.
yeah, well, hopefully, I mean, ideally, it will.
Any updates on the block project?
That's just still progressing. Take volunteers if anybody's available. We're meeting Saturdays at 2:00 here. We skipped last Saturday's meeting. But the group that's been coming, everybody's working together, just getting vendors and more food vendors, music stuff happening. Everybody's got a list of stuff we're working on. So nothing that they're really updated at the moment. It's actually gonna be wicked fun.
East Fishing Derby.
Saturday, right?
Oh, that's this Saturday?
Yeah, this Saturday start, today on the,
Where
on the lake.
where do you go? Just anywhere on the lake?
So you
Or
check
you
in
go-
is at Grand.
Probably on the ice.
Oh, check-ins at Greenwich. So Took me a minute. So check-ins at Grandview, for the ice fishing derby, what time does it start?
But it's
Seven.
seven.
7 a.m.?
It was ridiculous. It was either 6 or 7.
So I'll swing by around 10 to say that. Great, that's gonna be at 10.
Other topics, go to executive session. Anything else? No. I move to enter into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21, Purpose 2, to conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel, police chief contract, fire chief contract, library director contract. And under Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation update, discussion in open session may be detrimental to bargaining or litigating position. Roll call vote is needed. We will reconvene to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Take aye.
Raleigh, aye. Real aye. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Yes. Yeah.
You said yes.
I'm on a phone.
I think litigation's gonna take